Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of The Racist War and Everything, where we're coming to you a little late, fashionably and typically late. And we've got a fair bit for you today, but because we're coming to you a little bit late, we're not going to cover some of the more recent stories. For example, having a new Reserve Bank governor, our first woman ever. We'll discuss a little bit more of that either on the next episode or on XYZ Live. What we thought we would open with today is the findings of the Royal Commission into
RoboDebt.
Right, which was handed down a few days ago. So, a little bit of remedial rundown on it. This was what they refer to as an unlawful debt collection scheme from Centrelink. So it issued more than 400,000 false notices to welfare recipients between 2015 and 2019. You had the Commissioner, Catherine Holmes, who was presiding over this Royal Commission, conducted 46 days of hearings and heard from more than 100 witnesses. And that actually included two former Prime Ministers, including Scott Morrison, who most people are kind of pointing the finger at, I guess. Also Alan Tudge and Christian Porter, who were involved in social services. So it looks like, the Liberals are getting most of the blame here. The left loves this because it's a way of, in a way, sort of stirring up class warfare, I guess, because you can point to the Tories and say, hey, look how they're punishing poor people who are left on the dole. Now, look, I often say that the Royal Commission is an unnecessary process for most things, and I'm going to say that about this as well, because if you looked into how this actually came about, how these mistakes were made, it was actually pretty simple. What they did was they used income averaging, meaning they looked at what someone typically made in a month, and if their Centrelink payments didn't quite add up in comparison to that income averaging, in other words, if it looked like they were getting paid too much based on what their average income was, well, they were considered to have been overpaid and issued a false notice.
Yeah, no. And also
that's all it was.
Yeah, and also the problem that they did this retroactively, and I believe literally the thing looked back about 5 years in total. The ABC has been fucking hammering on this. You can't fucking listen to ABC shorts without hearing about this. But in the case of people are like, oh, how the fuck was someone forced to pay back $25,000-$30,000 from this kind of thing? It's just well, it looked back 5 years, and trust me, you can burn through 30K and someone can burn through 30K in fucking 2 years just on small things.
Yeah. I'm not sure what Centrelink actually gives you per year, but I imagine it would be less than 30K, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, easy.
Yeah.
Fuck it. I'll find out quickly.
So, I think both sides have been, politicizing the issue. One area where I will defend Albanese and Labour is, this is one of those inherently political issues anyway. You're talking about taxpayer money going to pay welfare recipients. That's political. So it doesn't matter if you're going to apportion blame on politicians. They're the ones overseeing it. So this is just where I don't see that, it's okay, you're politicizing it, but so what? It is a political issue. So I don't care if Labour is politicizing it. Now, Dutton is saying that they will consider all of the recommendations, even though it's not really for him to consider. He's in opposition. But, I guess a future coalition government would just want to make sure that something like this never happened again. So Most of the coalition, well, all of them, all the coalition government ministers, including the prime ministers involved here, which did involve Malcolm Turnbull as well.
It's about 14 grand, 15 grand a year.
Okay, yeah, that sounds about right. So, they are basically denying most of the personal findings against them. So the report, did actually point the finger at these ministers, former prime ministers. So the report found against Scott Morrison's claims that income averaging was a long-established practice in the Department of Social Services and allowed Cabinet to be misled by failing to make obvious inquiries.
As I understand, the standard process is like a play-by-play. And obviously, if they stuck with that, they probably wouldn't have been in this situation. But literally, it's literally pay stub to pay stub normally.
Yeah. And I mean, where it gives its name RoboDebt as well, it is in the, apparently the computers were just the ones who were determining whether or not someone overpaid. Everything was very automated.
Shodan is literally beating down the sub-proletariat.
Yeah, you could say that. So anyway, here's what Morrison said. I reject completely each of the findings which are critical of my involvement in authorizing the scheme and are adverse to me. So, then you had people like Stuart Robb. So he said that he sought advice, about what was going on and eventually shut down the scheme. So he was the social services minister as well, during one point. So he said, as the minister that worked hard to get the legal advice and close down the income compliance scheme, I welcome the Royal Commission report and its sensible recommendation. I have not received a notice of inclusion in the sealed section, and I understand they have all gone out. The sealed section is the part that is not being made public and is the part that apportions blame to the relevant ministers. So, yeah. So I guess Stuart Robb is out here saying, oh, it's okay, I agree with it because it looks like it hasn't actually gone after me personally.
I'm covering my ass.
Right. So look, that's not the case for Christian Porter, and it's not the case for Alan Tudge. Alan Tudge said he rejected in the strongest terms the suggestion he had abused power in the using of the media and that the report made no findings that I had knowledge that the scheme was unlawful. So this was the part where they accused Alan Tudge of kind of implementing a strategy through the media where he could reduce the amount of blame that was put on him. And the report said, that he did that. So, overall, just not a very rosy assessment of how the coalition government handled this.
I will crush you like an insect, slacker.
So look, people might remember that one of the things that spurred on the Royal Commission was that there was a class action lawsuit. So this was from the Gordon Legal. So they had obviously a lot of angry people contacting them about it. I believe the parents of two men who committed suicide as well. They're blaming the RoboDebt scheme on that because they were both issued notices. It's hard to say if that is a direct cause or not.
It's going to be hard to say, but literally, if you're a dude who's on believe that one of them lived away from his parents, one of them did not. So if you live with your parents, you're on $390 a fortnight, and then if you don't, you're on $600 a fortnight, so $300 a week. If you get issued a bill for I think one of them was issued a bill for nearly 30 grand. I think probably closer to 40 from memory. You might just kill yourself.
Oh, jeez.
Especially when they say that they're basically not gonna give you payments until that's settled.
Right. Well, Gordon Legal is looking at taking on the Commonwealth government in a civil trial because of this. Yeah. Now that they have the Royal Commission report, they've kind of got a much stronger case to actually go after the government and get compensation for the victims. And, you know, this is compensation that's obviously not just, well, it wouldn't really relate to any money that they handed over, considering the fact that, you know, any of these people who were falsely given these notices never had to actually pay the money back in the end. It's more to do with the emotional toll that was taken on them and the families as well. If, you know, like we just said, if you had a son who committed suicide, obviously that would count as well. So, well, to actually quote Andrew Gretsch from the law firm, he said, "I would summarize as watch this space." So in other words, yeah, we just got to keep our ear out and we'll hear about that soon. Now, this is actually the last thing on RoboDebt. It's resulted in some people calling on Scott Morrison to resign from Parliament altogether. Sometimes it's hard to believe, or sometimes you just forget that Scott Morrison still is in Parliament, actually, because he's on the back bench. Yeah. And these are like the first public statements on RoboDebt or anything that he has made in a long time, funnily enough. I doubt that. I think he's probably just going to hang around. He'll never get back on the front bench again.
No, it's impossible for a PM to fucking do that. I'm surprised, like, literally, like, when he was like, oh, going to the backbench, well, you're going to cycle out immediately. I'm surprised he's still actually around.
You know, look, the last time that happened was Kevin Rudd. And that did not go very well.
No.
On the front bench. That did not go well at all. So, yeah.
That was the revenge campaign.
Oh, absolutely it was. Well, I mean, funnily enough, Gillard basically said later on that she thought she could appease Rudd and stop him from destabilizing so much if she just conceded a bit of ground to him and gave him a ministerial position. Oh, how wrong you were, Julia.
Oh, Jesus. An autist scorned.
Yep. All right. But yeah, look, I don't think that'll happen. I think he'll probably just serve out the remainder of the term, which is only another 2 years. And then he'll just probably piss off and he'll get some government job.
Wasn't he angling for some casino or like, no, not casino, sports?
Yeah, rugby.
Yeah, rugby. Yeah, it was
rugby.
Let's see how that goes.
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of politicians are actually very well qualified for that kind of work. But yeah, look, if he wanted to go to a casino or something, I'm sure he could. Later on, that is where a lot of them go. Okay. So, let's go to climate and energy, one of our favorite topics. It is looking like part of our energy trade agreement with Japan is under serious threat. And this is directly related to the safeguard mechanism, the carbon tax by stealth. We might remember that a few months ago, Labor ramped up just how powerful this scheme is. In other words, there is going to be higher costs for higher emissions from who are considered to be the biggest emitters and polluters in the country. And that includes gas. So Japan is saying that Australia is no longer seen as a trusted supplier of LNG, of natural gas, and will have to seek new sources for gas in Alaska and other parts of the world. So they've even made diplomatic attempts here to exempt certain companies and certain sites that produce LNG from being hit so hard by the safeguard mechanism. Basically saying, can you let them emit more without taxing them so much? Australia is saying no to all of that. So Chris Bowen is the minister responsible for this. He is trying to guarantee Australia that our gas exports are not under any threat. It's very, very hard to believe him when Tokyo is directly telling us that they are. So, yeah, I mean, I guess the only silver lining here would mean that would maybe mean more gas to the domestic market, which we obviously need, considering we are turning off all our coal power plants and stopping coal mining. But again,
the problem is put more LNG in the domestic market. Oh yeah, is there any place that actually fucking burns it to make power anymore in so many years? No.
Well, I mean, if there are, they're all subject to a safeguard mechanism that heavily taxes them for doing so. So, yeah, which was the other point I was going to make. It's like, yeah, our market is triple, like whatever way you want to look at it, from a domestic point of view and an international trade point of view. And look, I'm sure it's not just Japan who is saying that they're going to be buying less gas from us. But Japan is one of the critical markets, though. They buy a shitload. They buy a shitload of our minerals as well, because they still have a strong manufacturing base in Japan, believe it or not. Still making a lot of good cars and
Nintendos.
Yeah. Nintendo Switches. Isn't that the latest one?
Yeah. They're going to come up with the Nintendo Switch 2, the fold-out blade.
Okay. So the Murray-Darling Basin is off track. This is no surprise to anyone, I don't think. So this is how Tanya Plibersek, who is the Environment and also the Water Minister, is how she described it. She said it needs a course change. And, well, here's the part of the article here that I found a little misleading. This is from the ABC. So this line says, despite 98% of the overall water recovery target already being met, there are parts of the plan, including New South Wales Water Resources Plan, the Sustainable Diversion Limit Adjustment Mechanism projects, and the 450 gigalitres promised to South Australia, that are well behind schedule. Now, for starters, I just find that 98% figure questionable. But that last one they included, which was the 450 gigalitre promise to South Australia, the deadline for that was next year. All right. And there's been something like 20 gigalitres allocated to it. This is something that every farmer, every pastoralist is just saying it is absolutely impossible, no matter what you do, to meet that deadline at the moment. So...
Oh, yes, we're going to fuck with your ability to irrigate your crops, you know. The one reason why all civilizations are built around fucking rivers.
Right. And, look, to be fair, it's not just Labour. The Nationals were always...
complicit
neglectful
a little bit
of this scheme.
Yeah.
The coalition generally have been, you know, ever since the Nationals sold their soul to Big Agra, who are just able to kind of provide their own water, and it provides a disadvantage to the smaller competitors as well, who are much more reliant on Murray-Darling for their water. Okay.
Yeah.
So, Dutton is, how the ABC words it, ramping up calls for nuclear power in Australia. So he actually did a speech at the Institute of Public Affairs. And by the way, that's actually a fairly rare thing, believe it or not, for the Liberal Party to do, even though they do get people from the IPA who end up running for the Liberal Party, like Tim Wilson, for example. But anyway, Dutton did an address there. He said, the only feasible and proven technology which can firm up renewables and help us achieve the goals of clean, cost-effective and consistent power is next-generation nuclear technologies. So what he went on to propose here was that the coal fire stations that, of course, are closing down all around the country should be converted into nuclear stations.
I probably wouldn't convert them, to be honest.
Well,
but
build
like
them on the ashes of them.
Yeah, no, I'd actually probably just pick different locations just to appease everyone and etc. But no, literally, like after the statement, the ABC was hammering like it's like, oh, you actually might end up spending like more money on electricity if you went for nuclear. I'm just like, how would that be the case? Like, how did you come to this conclusion? And I look at what they're actually saying. It's just like, oh, renewable energy is just free. Like, it's just like, it just like comes from the earth, man. It's free. You don't need any supporting infrastructure or maintenance on said supporting infrastructure to maintain it. No, it just exists, man. It's in the air.
Well, I remember there was like a funny report that Chris Bowen was banning about that said nuclear power was the most expensive form of power.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we ran over this at the time.
Did.
But yeah, from what I remember, it basically just pointed out that the construction of a nuclear plant costs more than a coal-fired plant. And if you look at that overall cost in that short-term period of like, just after its construction, yes, it would be more expensive, but not long-term. Long-term, it is incredibly less expensive.
It's like a molding process. The mold costs a fuck ton of money, but every single unit after that point costs like fucking cents.
Yeah. Yeah. So it might have an expensive startup cost, but who cares? I mean, how much money is Queensland spending at the moment, to get their green energy economy going before the Brisbane Games, for example?
The BHP.
What if they diverted that money into a nuclear plant instead?
The BHP little test windmill farm up far north of Perth, close to Jurien Bay. They're dropping 10K on that a week.
Wow. Yeah, so I just don't see that like, okay, fine, there's an initial cost of it, but Jesus, look at all the fucking money that we're spending on these useless renewable programs, including solar panel stations that we end up dismantling later on, like they did in Queensland once. All right. So
like the entire documentary Planet of the Humans, like when the documentarian went to like some hippie fest where they're talking about like some solar power plant. It was like, yeah, this is not the first station here. Like it's been like put up and disassembled like fucking like 15 times.
Yeah, and how much money is that costing? All right.
Yeah.
And it's funny how the left suddenly become fiscal conservatives when it comes to the construction of a nuclear plant, Now you care about the costs involved, do you? You didn't care about any of the costs involved for any of these other projects before. So, all right. So, excess power, this is in WA, from Perth's rooftop solar systems are going to be used to help struggling WA families. So the government is claiming that this scheme is going to save those struggling families up to $500 a year. So, well, look, here's part of the scheme. So that is going to be half of the government's $400 electricity bill relief payment that was promised to every household here in the last state budget. Will be distributed today, according to this article, which was, let's quickly open it up, on the 10th of July, 5 days ago. So Roger Cook, who is our new premier, he announced additional assistance for some households with free power being provided from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. for families facing financial hardship. So
precisely when they are not at home.
Right. And so then the excess power that's being used from solar systems is going to be fed back into the grid and allocated to this scheme where they receive this free power at the times where, they're not at home. I mean, they're like school hours, aren't they? Like 9 a.m., approximately 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. So, Why is it that you've chosen those times, Roger Cook? Where
actually, let me check because I've got solar panels. I can tell you why. It's not because I think it's making an impact on the environment. It's because the power company gives me money for selling my units. Oh yes, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. is basically 9 p.m. to 3 p.m. is basically the only fucking time my system produces any fucking power whatsoever.
Yeah, and for most people, that's just when your meter is ticking over.
Yeah.
Maybe you've left the front light on or something. That's it. So.
Oh yes, you're totally heating your house and cooking food if you have an induction thing, which I don't recommend. Yes, and you've got your lights on because it's very dark between 9 and 3 p.m. You know.
Yeah.
You got your heating on because it's or cooling on because it's maybe you're cooling. Maybe in summer this will make a difference, but like fucking not right now. That's for fucking sure.
Right. So look, that means though, with the exception of that, obviously, a very kind of sneaky, silly scheme, we are getting $200 electricity credit though. So you would have gotten that from Monday for our WA listeners, and close to the end of the year, you're going to get another $200, which I guess is okay. But again, it says the point that I've made a few times, which is the only way that the government can actually help you save money on your power bill, when we're shutting down coal and gas to an extent.
Give us money.
Yeah, is by a direct payment. That's it. They can't actually, even the price controls that they implemented have not resulted in a reduction. Maybe it resulted in a smaller increase to electricity prices, but it certainly did not result in a reduction. And remember, that is what Labor promised in the election. I can't remember what was it, like $175 a year? No, $275 a year. Albo was promising. What's happened to that? All right. So yeah, all you can do is actually just say, here's a credit. Here's the government just giving you money. That is the only way they can do it.
Just give us some fucking money.
I mean, if that's what it takes, then fine. I don't have a problem with it. But, don't kid us that renewables is the cheapest form, as Chris Bowen likes to keep telling us. All right. Well, we're moving on to the economy, but we're staying in WA, and that is, believe it or not, we have resumed our AAA credit rating. So this is the one from, I think, 2 different financial firms who, apparently have the clout to do this. One is Moody's Investor Services, and the other is Standard & Poor's. So they have both recently taken our rating from a AA to a AAA rating. Now, that's basically because of 2 things. One, it's because of our GST revenue that, Mark McGowan successfully negotiated like a year or 2 ago now. So we are actually the only jurisdiction, besides the federal government, that is passing budget surpluses. The other aspect of it, of course, is just that our mining sector is somewhat resurgent. We're definitely not in the boom years of the early 2000s, but we're doing a little better. Now,
we take rock out of ground. It gets traded at a pretty consistent price.
Yeah, and look, but like I said, our trade with gas is under threat from Japan. And remember, okay, fine, like minerals are not gas, but it's obviously involved in the process.
Yeah.
These power plants and these mining projects are very much interlinked in terms of how they work.
With themselves.
Yeah, so there's always spillover effect involved here. And, I just point out again that in terms of the GDP, so that means the national growth in the economy, in the last quarter was 0.2%, despite the fact that we imported almost 500,000 people in 1 year. So even the shot to the economy we're giving with mass immigration, and it's not even really a shot to the economy, it's just numbers, that's all. It's not increasing living standards. Even that has just barely given us positive growth. So I want to know how much of that fake economy WA is responsible for. You know, like, probably less than what it is for New South Wales and Victoria, because they don't have, you know, really mining states.
There's the service economies, which is exponentially more fake and gay.
Yes, yeah, that was exactly the way I was going to describe it. Was they're the fake and gay economies. Ours is at least a little bit real.
Like in WA, we produce rock. Here is rock. I will trade rock for money.
But we've got something tangible to actually show. You know.
Yeah, I am applying accounting service, and basically, my service is an indeterminate amount of value depending on how many accountants are doing that at a certain rate. So yeah, like my accounting service is much more up to speculation than rock.
Right. Yeah. So you might be unimpressed by rock, but at least it's real. Okay. So
we grugging over here.
But look, also, I've just always been struck by how incredibly generous these companies are with these ratings, because AAA credit rating, there's literally nothing better. Okay, that is the top rating that you can get.
Wind the clock back to like the aughts and etc. They're a bit more brutal, but right now, from what I understand, they're literally trying to shore up Western economies and trying to inflate Western economies, at least in like just the lending and credit sense, because we're actually getting competed with by this upcoming, AB system. Or BRIC system.
Well,
we're trying to look good, so BRIC doesn't.
Yeah, people like Gerald Celente was saying that in, just when the GFC was going on, because I do remember that, when Rudd was doing the stimulus spending back then, Australia managed to avoid technical recession. We didn't avoid the real recession, okay, because relative wages were going down. But we were able to maintain a AAA credit rating. And I do remember, Joe Hockey, who was the shadow treasurer back then, saying, well, just what you said, it's not a real rating. It's just there to pump up confidence in the market. And that, and I think he was right. If he was in government, of course, he wouldn't have been saying that. But yeah,
when he's on fucking Sunrise,
yeah, with smoozing with Rudd, that was very cringe back then.
I still just as a tangent, I still love the little stimulus check thing, and people were basically using Google to figure out what the American populace was thinking during the stimulus check, and then someone someone typed in when are we, and then the first result was getting our tax return or something like that, and then someone typed in when is we, and then getting a stimmy check.
God, yeah. I got them $750 back in the day. And then you had to make a post on Facebook saying, I have just been stimulated. That's what everyone was doing. That was the running gag.
Yeah.
When you got that money. Okay. Now, the other story we've got on the economy, we're going national here. And that is, we've had a poll taken. This was by the CT Group, which is some financial firm. They found that 13% of Australian voters think Anthony Albanese is doing enough to address cost of living pressures. Now, okay, so that's no one, okay? No one thinks he's doing enough.
The retarded 10th.
Yeah. And yeah, they're the people who just confused what box to tick or whatever. We got the question wrong. And if you look at there are countless other polls, that ask voters, what do you think are the number one issues? Rate them. The cost of living is always number one, okay? And then even some of the issues that are underneath that are sub-issues of cost of living. It'll be like power prices, petrol prices, rent, okay? Like they're still all related to cost of living. So like first, second and third, this is the issue that people are actually worried about. But Albanese and Labor do very little to talk about that, and certainly like barely anything to actually address it. In fact, they're keeping schemes going that are continuing to make it worse. So, this is another reason why I think that The Voice is going to fail. It's not just because people don't want it, which they don't, but they also just feel like it's a distraction from the real issues here. Most people, I think, kind of just see this as a symbolic overture to Aborigines and not much more. And they're just kind of frustrated, thinking, hey, this isn't why we voted you in. We voted you in to help us with our wages, with our cost of living pressures. And you're just worried about this bloody advisory body in the Commonwealth to tell us that we're bad, evil, guilty white people. People don't like that.
And unfortunately, we're in the Finkelthink cycle, so it's going to be fucking retarded. But it's just like you're spending your entire fucking little shtick here dealing with people who don't have cost of living. Like it literally costs them nothing to live. In fact, it costs me for these people to live.
Yeah, I mean, look, when we cover housing here related to the general population, it's people having to downsize to yurts. When we talk about housing for the Aboriginal population, it's about literally just building them new houses from scratch because they have destroyed them.
Yeah.
All right? So, yeah, they don't have to worry about that cost of living. The government just pays for it for them, particularly if you're in a remote area. Okay. So, yeah, let's move on to The Voice here. And so the Nine Network has apologized for publishing an advert that was in various newspapers. Now, if you haven't seen this, it had the West Farmers CEO with, I think it was like his daughter on his lap or something. And he was carrying a sack of money that said $2 million.
Oh, yeah. Randy boy fucking... I saw this one, I didn't really get it, and then Rand showed me, I was like, I didn't get the joke there, like what the fuck was the joke? And it's just like, yeah, it's like, they portrayed Thomas Mayo as like a little boy communist, so that's racist.
Yeah, he had a red shirt on with a hammer and sickle, and he sort of looked like he was dancing. So I don't know, they made it look like
monkey.
Yeah, like a dance monkey or a minstrel show or something. But yeah.
He's half Jewish. I mean, he's got that entertainment industry blood in him.
Yeah. So yeah, that was just because West Farmers, on the same weekend that Yes 23 kicked off their campaign, they gave $2 million to Yes 23. That, of course, Thomas Mayo is involved in. It wasn't just West Farmers though. BHP and Rio Tinto also gave $2 million to it. But yeah, I mean, look, as soon as I saw that cartoon, I thought, all right, this is going to end badly for them. Like,
yeah,
it's like, guys, look, you just don't make fun of an Aboriginal person in a cartoon. I mean, look, I have no problem with them doing it, obviously, but you're going to piss people off. So I could see that apology coming from a mile away. And last Insiders program, they were all just feigning their outrage as to how disgusting that depiction was. The only thing I would say was inaccurate about it, though, was the idea that Thomas Mayo had to dance for the monkey. Dance for the money. That he had to
for the monkey.
that he had to do something for it. Like it was sort of saying like, the West Farmers guy has this guy under his control. That wasn't the case at all. It's the other way around. It's the Aboriginal lobby having that institutional power and support behind them, so much so that West Farmers actually feels compelled to basically give them, shakedown money. That's the way I see it. So I don't think that, Thomas Mayo has actually danced to earn it or anything. All right.
So his birthright is Jewish.
Yeah, I believe quarter Jewish, quarter Aboriginal, half white, which, as David says, means, Europeans are very bad at genocide. The fact that he exists, advocating for the Australian Communist Party in the current year. Okay, so Linda Burney, who is the Indigenous Affairs Minister, so of course she's the main minister responsible for promoting The Voice. I got to remind people the other minister responsible, though, like second to her would be Mark Dreyfus, because he's the Attorney General. He's the Chief Law Officer, so he's the one who's got to write up all the rules. In a way, actually, he would be even more involved. But Linda Burney is the public face. And I don't know if that's such a good idea for Labor, because Linda Burney cannot speak to save her life.
Linda Burney is the least socially adjusted person in that entire fucking sector of politics.
Yeah, I mean, I think, she's a half caste or a quarter caste. I don't know. I mean, at least you can see a little bit of Aboriginal in her. But she's
91 octane.
She's what?
She's 91 octane rather than 98.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how far back it goes. I mean, Aboriginal genes are recessive, though, so, I mean, they don't tend to kind of come out.
Except the fucking nose.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, look, if you look at Jacinta Price, yeah, she's got that huge nose, but she's so much lighter than her mum, though. Her mum is... Yeah, her best Price is, as black as the Ace of Spades, but Jacinta Price is way lighter. But Jacinta Price can actually put her words together. She is quite articulate. Linda Burney looks like she is always struggling. What?
She got that hybrid neurology.
Yeah, whereas with Linda Burney, it's like the Aboriginal genes in her brain are more dominant and kind of always handicapping her in that respect. It looks like she's just constantly battling to get the cognitive capacity to get her words out better. But look, she has left open the possibility of legislating what she names as the 4 priority areas for The Voice. Now, that includes, but is not restricted to, health, education, housing, and jobs. Now, what's so weird about this is that obviously the job of an advisory body is to give advice to the government. What she's saying is that we need legislation in order for the government to advise the advisory body on what to advise the government on. Okay? Which is like a ridiculous game of tennis with the advice going back and forth all the time. It really doesn't make any sense. You also then have to ask the question, well, if she's going to legislate for these 4 priority areas, why can't she just make the relevant decisions, funding, and legislation in her capacity as Indigenous Affairs Minister? Why does she have to legislate for the type of advice to give an advisory body to throw back at the government? It's all just getting so convoluted and confusing. So Peter Dutton is very rightly so pointing this out. But at the same time, you've got the Nationals. So David Littleproud, we've got a little bit on him later because he could well be on the chopping block in terms of his own leadership. He's actually saying that Labor need to put this legislation in before the referendum. Now, if you were to put that legislation in, that could also serve as the precursor for a legislated version of The Voice in the future.
Yep.
And that's one of the real dangers here. We've mentioned before that the Voice now is bipartisan. Peter Dutton says that he wants a legislated version of The Voice. And now David Littleproud coming out and saying this, that we need to legislate for the priority areas of the Indigenous Voice. He is at least supporting a legislative precursor to a Voice coming into power. So that essentially means that you've got Labor, Liberal, and Nationals saying that they support the Indigenous voice and that if we don't get it at the referendum, it's going to be legislated at some point in the future.
Yeah, but so, a rant about this. I was like, look, that they may be willing to take an L on the referendum, but you're going to get it like one way or another.
Yeah. Yeah, and it would still be just as powerful as the model that would be implemented if the referendum were to succeed, simply because of the fact that it would be legislation that no one would repeal, okay? So obviously when you've got a constitutional change, the only way to change it is to have another referendum. With legislation, all you need is another party to repeal it, but they're not going to do it because, as I just said, all three major parties support it now, so no one's going to do it. So, yeah, even though there is going to be a thumping no vote come the end of the year, we are still going to get the voice. It shows how fake and gay our democracy actually is. The will of the people is not respected. Okay.
Man, I love democracy.
All right, so look, on that confusing model that I just talked about, advising the advisory board on what to advise, Linda Burney has come out in an attempt, but a very bad attempt, to make that message less confusing by describing it as a two-way process. So she said that scope should be a respectful discussion with the voice. I think she meant to say with the voice between the government. And then she just, again, went on to name those 4 priority areas: health, housing, jobs, and education. She said, I have identified very clearly what I think the priorities are, but obviously there are other issues like baby birth weights, life expectancy. But I really say very clearly there is nothing to lose and everything to gain from this establishment of a voice. All right, so half of that sentence was just the rhetorical talking points again. That's all they ever do. It was just say, no, this will work, this is a boost, this is a voice to those who are never heard, or whatever. But there's never any detail here, which is why I say she didn't really make this any clearer. Okay. All right, so we went through this a little bit on XYZ, but I'll just quickly go over it. So there was a poll that was put out here. I believe this was by the Australia Institute. Yeah, the Australia Institute, who I'd never heard of before. And you'd think a think tank with the name Australia in it would be conservative leaning, but no. This is clearly a left-leaning one. Now, the main takeaway that the media has from this poll is that migrants and young Australians are more likely to vote for the voice. Now, the young person part, that certainly doesn't surprise me. On the last episode, we were actually talking about how the typical left to right move that people make, going from left in their youth to right as they get older, is slowing down for Gen Z. So, Gen Zyklon is looking increasingly unlikely, unfortunately. So that doesn't surprise me, that young people are more inclined to vote yes. The migrant one, that was one I was a little iffy on. I wasn't sure, because, any Asian who's had interactions with Aborigines doesn't like them. And look, for that matter, anyone who's had any interaction with Aborigines doesn't like them. All right? I think it all sort of depends on your proximity to them, and it also depends on how much you are motivated by being anti-white. There's probably just a lot of migrants out there who think if I vote for the voice, that in a way is going to stick it to whitey, so I might as well vote for it. So they could be the factors here. So I'll just read you the figures. So it says younger Australians were most likely to support the voice. So that's 73% of 18 to 29-year-olds said that they would vote yes. Support for the no side appears to increase with age, with 50 to 59-year-olds evenly split, 40% for the yes vote and no. The majority of Australians aged 60 and above, but this is only a bare majority, 51%, say that they'll vote no, and only 38% of this over 60s cohort said they would vote yes. So the rest undecided. Now, here's the other part, though, that makes me question the accuracy of this data. They found that a majority of Australians, so this is every age group, every demographic group, 52% said that they would vote yes in the referendum. No, clearly not. When you look at the news polls and the Gallup polls that have been engaging this for over a year now, there has been a steady decrease in the yes vote. And the most recent, I think it was a Gallup poll, had the yes vote at 38%.
Yeah. Undecided 7 and then no 55.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not like that 38% just appeared out of nowhere. It was a steady decrease in support that eventually got down to the number 38. All of a sudden, we have this poll out of nowhere from the Australia Institute saying, actually, no, it's not 38%, it's 52. Piss off. I don't believe you.
No.
So all that other data that they gave on, 73% of 18 to 29-year-olds saying that they vote yes. Okay, fine. That's Gen Z. But even that is an incredibly high support number. That's like as high as Kevin Rudd's approval rating when he was giving out the money, however much it was. I forget how much it was. That is just incredibly high. So I really, really press extra doubt on all those numbers the Australia Institute is giving.
It's a cope poll. That's what it is.
Yeah. Now look, the no vote, have actually implemented some pretty good ways of getting the message out there. So one of the things that they've done is they've just over the weekend they made 1.1 million phone calls to households and mobile phones. Oh no, sorry, this was on Thursday night. Using a recorded message by Jacinta Price. Now, I haven't heard the message, but I guess I would have to really kind of hear how long it was.
Really important one, vote no.
You could have that woman with Mark McGowan speaking Creole. That would be good. No, but if you have a really long phone call that is made, and obviously it's not a person that you know, it's an unsolicited phone call, that gets irritating and, you just want to hang up and then you're inclined to say, I'm going to do the opposite of what this person just told me to do. But look, I'm assuming that they haven't done that. Typically they're not that silly. But also, it's just a much more effective way of reaching people than like community barbecues where only the people who were already going to vote yes turn up. You're not actually reaching the undecided voters. That is exactly what this campaign is designed to do. Actually get out there and just talk to the average person who hasn't made their mind up yet and tell them why they should vote no. So, yeah, I think the no campaign is definitely like a step ahead of them in terms of campaigning. And, the yes campaign just can't afford that at this point in time with their numbers so critically low. Now this is an interesting one. Megan Davis. Maybe you've seen this woman. I believe she's a legal academic. She's a huge fat woman who's actually basically an islander. Okay. My understanding is she's got more islander, like Tongan or something in her than she does Aboriginal. She's only got like 1/4 or 1/8, and she's a big fat mess. But, she is actually saying that most Indigenous bureaucracy that exists in Canberra and elsewhere just exists for itself, is the way she worded it. Now, I think the reason why she came out and said this, though, is trying to give people the idea that the Indigenous voice actually results in a reduction of bureaucracy. Okay?
No.
No, it's not. And of course, this is something that the no vote has been putting out there. It's a somewhat useful message. I think there would be better ways of communicating it, but nonetheless. So she said this: our people didn't come to Uluru saying we want more bureaucrats. They don't like bureaucrats subjugating them and up in their face telling them what they should and shouldn't do. What they would like is the agency to be cut in half. So what she is saying here, just to summarize the other stuff that she said, was that once the voice is implemented, that would then allow the government to cut off all these other strangling pieces of bureaucracy in favor of the voice. Well, Megan,
that's not going to fucking happen.
As well, exactly. No, this will be an extra layer of bureaucracy, and I cannot for the life of me see the government actually shedding any of these other bureaucratic entities. I mean, the only time this has really ever been done is when John Howard abolished ATSIC. Okay. Which, by the way, was basically a legislated version of The Voice back then. Okay. We've had a test run of what The Voice is, and it turned out to be so corrupt that John Howard had to follow Pauline Hanson's advice in her maiden speech to actually abolish it. He initially said, no, there's no way we're doing that. AFSIC's here to stay. And then he had to bite the bullet and say, no, we're getting rid of it.
We're getting fucked in the ass out here. There's like, $300 million that just fucking disappeared in thin air.
Right, yeah. So if you're trying to assure the undecided vote, Megan, that this is going to not result in more democracy, I don't think people are going to buy that. Not for a second.
Not result in more democracy. That's a Freudian slip.
Yeah. Okay. Gone over the par with the Nationals. Oh God, Fiona Stanley.
Oh Jesus.
I sometimes forget that's actually a woman and not a hospital. So, Fiona Stanley is,
still a triage case.
Yeah, look, what did she do again? Was she the spray on skin woman, or I forget? She was. She looks horrible, man. She looks like she sleeps in a solarium, like she actually does, like a Stan Grant, even though she's not Aboriginal at all and doesn't claim to be Aboriginal, but she looks like she's trying to make herself look Aboriginal. Anyway, this was really weird.
Epidemiologist.
Yeah, I thought she was the spray-on skin woman, like for burns victims. Like, what she did was actually kind of cool. Her innovation, that is. But all the stuff she comes out in support of is always extremely paused. But she's saying that we have a working example of how an Indigenous voice to Parliament is beneficial. And this is about COVID-19. All right, so I'll read what she said here. We would have anticipated, because of the high risks of Aboriginal people, chronic disease, overcrowded conditions, and most Aboriginal people actually live in cities. Only 18% live in communities. They were of high risk of contracting the COVID virus. Well, within the first 18 to 20 months of the pandemic, Aboriginal people had 6 times fewer cases than non-Indigenous people did. How did they do it? They had a voice. They had a voice in the National Aboriginal Community Controlled Health Organisation. They had a voice at all state and territory organisations, right down to communities. Okay. First thing I would say there is, all right, if they already had the voice in that community organisation, why do they need another one? And second of all, if it is true that they were reporting much fewer cases, she's claiming 6 times fewer cases, that's simply because of the fact that they weren't getting tested.
Yeah, like, don't equate resilience with a lack of agency.
Yeah, right. That's all it is. I mean, just like half of all Aboriginal people don't even know there's a referendum coming up. I would argue that back then, half of all Aboriginal people didn't even know COVID existed. Okay? They're the real COVID deniers. They didn't know it was there. So yeah, that's pathetic. That is really pathetic. And
you deny it with schizophrenic theories. I deny it because I don't even know what the fuck is going on half the time.
Yeah. And also, look, if that was going to be the case, that they somehow managed to use the superior agency that they had combating COVID, why has that not translated into general health improvements for them when it comes to fighting all the other diseases that they're ravaged with, and that they don't get treated for because they don't bother to? All right? All you've probably got here is like a data set that found that they weren't reporting as high numbers because they weren't going to clinics or they weren't doing rat tests or whatever. That's all it was. Okay, last thing on the voice here is, well, look, we're probably going to talk a bit on this on XYZ, so I won't go into it too much, but just to summarize, we do have Kosher Sandwich here. We've got some Jewish groups supporting the voice. We've got some Jewish groups not supporting it. Now, as is kind of typical, you will find that the majority of Jewish groups will go to the left side.
Yeah.
And then you've kind of got the token conservatives that make up, like, I don't know, 20% or so on the other side. It usually works that way. It's how it works in America. You know, most Jews vote Democrat. But then again, you know, you've got very prominent Jews that are involved in conservative politics, like Ben Shapiro and Dennis Prager. I think it's like that. Pretty similar in Australia. So, you know, we did the deep dive on Mark Liegler on the last XYZ Live. He is perhaps the person most responsible for the Uluru Statement from the Heart. You, of course, have Julian Lisa as well, who is, you know, on the backbenches now because he had to go against the coalition's official position on opposing the voice. And on the weekend, you had, what was this group called? Here it is. Marcia Langdon. She opened what was referred to as the Jewish community's support of the yes vote. So this was Kol Halev, Jewish voice for yes. So she opened this on the weekend, and this was kind of, it's not just one Jewish group, it's a coalition of them, mainly situated in Victoria, and yeah, they're just running an official campaign for them. Now at the same time, we've got the Australian Jewish Association that put out a media release on the 10th, so on Monday, saying Australian Jewish Association will oppose the proposed Indigenous voice.
Yeah, AGA, coming out to say nay.
Yeah, and, you know, look, you just Google that or whatever. We'll go through it on XYZ anyway. But, yeah. I think this is important that, like, you know, they make those token overtures to actually oppose it for one simple reason. That you can't say the Jews are entirely behind the yes vote. They have to be able to say no, the Jewish community is actually split. And, you know...
We're not a monolith.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, sometimes it is genuine in that, like, okay, yeah, one side supports it, one side doesn't. However, you have to look at the motivation behind it. Is it because they don't think it would be good for Aboriginal people? Or is it because they don't think it would be good for Jews? All right.
Is this good for Jews?
Yeah. Always remember this, that when Jews don't appear to be a monolith, when it appears like they are disagreeing with each other, what they're actually disagreeing on is tactics on how to further Jewish interests. Okay? They're not looking at the issue holistically and saying, would this be a good thing overall? They're saying, would this be a good thing overall for Jews? And on that question, that is where the differences actually lie. And I don't see how the voice would be any different. Okay. So, we'll move on to other Aboriginal news here. Oh God. Alright, so we've got more deaths in custody that they're trying to play up here. I've only got one example in my prep today, so this was, Jesus, how the hell do you say that name? Nego Rigoric? I don't know. This was,
Nigaguric.
Okay. Jeez, we're gonna go back on YouTube soon, so we gotta rein that in. Until we get kicked off again.
And bum, Yuma and bum.
Oh no, sorry, this was in the Northern Territory. So look, I'm not going to comment specifically on this one because I haven't really read the details, but I will just say, the ABC is increasingly covering this stuff now. Or at least, you know, as soon as they get a sniff of anything like this, they want to talk about it. Because they want people, instead of thinking about Aboriginal crime, you've instead got to think about deaths in custody. Yeah. And that makes you think that, you know, this is just a result of white people putting them in jail because they find it fun or something.
Those evil cops, they were trying to stop him from self-inducing a glycomic episode.
Yeah, or something like that. Okay. What have we got? Oh, right. So, again in the Northern Territory, so the government is saying that the leading cause of homelessness in the Northern Territory is domestic violence. Yeah, I guess so. It's obviously mixed with poverty though, but anyway, you've got the domestic violence minister, Kate Warden. And by the way, I think that has to be the only, place where there is a minister for domestic violence. I've never heard of this portfolio outside of the Northern Territory. But anyway, she announced on Thursday that they've got a new program that is going to fund community housing for people in Darwin and Alice Springs, who lives there, to sublease properties to people who are homeless or at risk of becoming homeless because of domestic violence. Now, let me just quickly Control F this article, and I'm just going to see if... No, the word Aboriginal does not appear in this article. Let me try Indigenous.
Damn.
No, you probably heard that sound on my computer there. That says no as well. Okay. You read through this whole article. It's an average length article for the ABC. Say youth.
Yeah.
No. It doesn't say that either.
They've come up with a new code word.
Yeah. So, you know, this is the only jurisdiction that needs a program like this, a specific housing program related to domestic violence, and a domestic violence minister here. I wonder what kind of people they're dealing with there in Darwin and the Alice Springs. Okay. On to housing. So, well, this is actually to do with the urbanization of Australia. So this is in Victoria. And this is a plot of land where they're basically evicting everyone. Where is this? The Barrack Beacon Housing Estate. So that is in Port Melbourne. They're currently demolishing it. And the government, this is part of the government's $5.3 billion housing build. So, in this plot of land, you currently have 89 homes. They'll all be demolished. And that is going to make room for up to 350 new homes by 2025, 2026. All right. So do the maths on that. That is an extreme amount of urban density that you're talking about here, squashing people into a very, very small area. And you've got people who rightly are really angry about that. It tends also to be people who are low income. So, I mean, there was one woman there, 68-year-old retiree who lives there by herself, and she's been kicked out. And, you know, house demolished, she's going to obviously receive compensation of some kind.
Yeah.
But she's like, I don't want to move out of here. And where's she going to have to go? She's probably going to have to go into one of these apartment blocks where instead of having a house with only a few neighbors around her and still having a backyard, she's going to go into this tiny shoebox.
Into the rape cage.
Yeah, like surrounded by drug addicts and non-whites all around her. Okay? To live out the rest of her retired life. Fuck that. But it's happening all around us. All right.
Hope you enjoy retirement.
Oh, that was the only housing story I had this week. Okay, so on to aged care. Now, it's still actually, in terms of the numbers of people we have in the workforce, is really bad. So this is despite the fact we're importing a heap of Africans and Filipinos.
Indians and...
Yeah.
The rich brown tapestry of the world.
Absolutely. But also, remember, not too long ago, we gave them a whopping 15% pay increase. It probably still wasn't enough, considering just how low their pay was before. But just in terms of like a relative increase, it was definitely like the biggest out of, all the public servants and everything. They got a huge increase.
Yeah.
But still, they're being told that many of, nursing homes are actually just shutting down. Now, part of this is because of what's called Labour's 24/7 nursing targets. Now, what this meant was that, like, each nursing home would have to have at least one registered nurse,
an RN, yeah,
at all times in the nursing home. Okay, that includes at night. Like, you've got to have a night shift registered nurse who actually comes on. And if you can't do that, you're not meeting the regulations, and it basically means you can't run. Now, Labor did say, because, after a while they realized this scheme was unfeasible, that you could apply for an exemption, and, you just had to kind of tick other boxes to make up for that. Apparently that process has been very slow. A lot of the nursing homes that would be eligible for those exemptions have not been approved yet, and because of that, they've had to shut down. So,
I would try like one RN. If you can get like 5 enrolled nurses, that might be okay. But like, yeah, just a registered. Even there, they're struggling. Registered nurses, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even the normal nurses, I forget what they're called. They're struggling to get them as well, and just regular aged care staff, just care workers. They're really still, even with the 15% increase, they're still struggling.
Yeah, no, like when I want medical care, I want an enrolled nurse or a registered nurse, or at least an enrolled nurse, but an RN or BN, RN or EN, but I tend to just get BNs.
Okay, what's a BN?
Dark of complexion.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was trying to work out if you were actually making a joke there, or if
no, I was doing a racism.
I see. Okay. Okay, right. So, on to industrial relations. Now, the HSU were really ramping things up in New South Wales, saying that the new Premier, Chris Minns, is ignoring them at his peril. The HSU actually has 74,000 members there, and they were demanding a 6% wage increase or a flat $3,500 annual boost to their salaries. Chris Minns was staring them down for a good while and basically saying, no, like, I think he was only offering 3 or 3.5%. That seems to be the typical rate that premiers offer in their public service. However, they actually had a fair bit of a win. It ended up being a minimum of a 4% increase to all public sector workers, so not just health workers. And when it came to the lowest paid workers in the health sector, they're actually getting up to 8.5%. So, yeah.
Alrighty.
The union had threatened industrial action to take place from Monday, the 10th of July. And looks like Chris Minns just kind of got in at the last minute. And they avoided that. As far as I know, no industrial action took place this week in New South Wales. Not for the health sector anyway. So yeah, I guess a little bit of a win there. Inflation, of course, is going down at the moment. I hope it stays that way. It probably will, but, that certainly doesn't mean
it should be the end of the cycle. We'll fucking see. Economics is retarded.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've had 11 interest rate rises, I think, in a row. Something like that. I think we are actually kind of getting the pressure down on it, but we're still importing way too many people. So, even if the overall rate of inflation does go down, I would suspect that, barriers to entry into the housing market are still going to be there. Petrol prices are still going to be expensive. Power prices are still going to be expensive. The necessities, okay?
A society is really good energy, where, all the necessities needed to fucking have kids are completely unattainable by your average person. So you need to import like a million brown people. That's how you know that your society is running really, really well, and everything is really well economically balanced. That's your hallmark right there.
Right. Yeah, and it's just shit how, you can still get a pack of lollies for $2, but if you want to buy regular groceries, it costs so much money, and that is like one perverse thing in our system that really sucks. Like, we're incentivized to buy shit junk food, but everything else is too expensive. Okay. All right. So you saw that Donald Trump Jr. is not coming to Australia. You hear about this?
God damn, I'm heartbroken.
Yeah. Well, look, I don't care either. I mean, he's got every right to come here if he wants. I'm not opposed to that, but What happened here? The Home Affairs Minister is Claire O'Neill. And the rumor going around is that Home Affairs flagged Donald Trump Jr. as an extremist threat to Australia who would disrupt the good order of the country, or however it is they word it, and therefore denied him a travel visa to come here to speak at certain events. So Claire O'Neill has denied that. She referred to Junior as a big baby and said that the reason why this actually didn't happen is because the events that he was slotted to speak at were just subject to poor ticket sales.
Oh, no.
Now, I think that is actually probably true. Okay. For one thing, we haven't seen any screenshots of emails or anything that Donald Trump or his entourage have been sent regarding his flight here. So,
I imagine someone would want to boast about it as well. Like, the fucking government be like, yeah, or at least some bureaucrat would be like, yeah, I banned you from the country, me.
There might be a bit of that, but I mean, look, always remember, like, bureaucrats very often will say things that are contrary to government policy. That's something Keith Winshottle always points out when it comes to the stolen generations, is sometimes you'll get these examples of like a bureaucrat who says, I don't want Aborigines living here or something. And it's like, okay, but was that actually a government policy at the time? Hell no, it wasn't. And what power did the bureaucrat have to implement that idea of theirs? None.
It just reminded me, I went on some, like, stream with an American dude and an Australian dude, and they're watching videos of, like, completely insane people. And, there was this one woman, and she was an accountant. And she was just like, I was taken to a facility where they curb stomped black babies into the ground. It was in the Grand Canyon. It was an underground facility in the Grand Canyon where they curb stomped black babies. And just like, yeah, she was like an accountant that handled like fucking transactions between mutual funds.
Oh, man. Yeah, but there's no end to the fake stories that they come up with. But look, this was actually an event by Turning Point Australia. Now, isn't that Charlie Kirk?
Yes.
Turning Points? Yeah. So, I don't think that is all that popular here. I mean, like CPAC, I guess, does get a few ticket sales, but that's because they've got many different, big name speakers there. This was just Donald Trump Jr. That I don't think that, too many people care about him. I certainly don't care about him.
Man, I love AFPAC, so they can have a dude who probably did a line of cocaine in the bathroom and is still somehow drunk while also being on cocaine. Literally rattle out death threats to another speaker.
Oh, jeez. Okay. On the other hand, isn't Lauren Southern's getting divorced?
Already divorced.
Oh, they're already divorced. Okay.
Yeah.
And it turned out that the husband was a happer.
Yeah, and a Fed.
And a Fed. Okay.
Yeah, and a Fed. Yeah, well, like a contractor for ASIO or some shit like that.
Because I think when she moved to Australia, I'm pretty sure that was the same time that Gavin McInnes was denied a visa, and David Icke as well, because that was, in the case of David Icke, that was because of the Jewish groups who believe that when he says lizard, he actually means Jew. You're wrong. David Icke is actually that fucking crazy that he means lizard. But that, I think, is why Lauren Southern said, I'm retiring from public life. I'm no longer going to be a political commentator. Then as soon as she moves to Australia, she's back into public life again. I think that that's actually what happened. So what I'm saying is, it is actually possible.
She's not in Australia anymore.
Who? Lauren Southern?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know. But I mean, it was her intention to live here, though, at the time. Right?
Should have stayed here with our guys. We treated you nicely, Lauren.
Well, I'm just saying that, you can be denied a visa if you're deemed to be a political extremist, even though it's ridiculous to say that Lauren Southern and Gavin McInnes are political extremists.
Shove McInnes.
And David Icke, for that matter. So, it's not entirely without merit to make that point, but just simply because of the fact they have provided no evidence leads me to say no, I don't think so. It was just bad ticket sales. Okay, so, damn, we had TRWOE over in Australia last week. That's the affectionate term they use for Joko Widodo, the Prime Minister of Indonesia. Or is he the president? I forget what title they have there. Anyway,
Head Chieftain.
Head Chieftain. What are we actually
the only actual gas station over there?
I mean, any talks we have with Indonesia are usually economically based. So here's what we actually had. Business visas for Indonesians will be extended from 3 to 5 years to, and this is Albanese's quote, to support our expanding business and commercial links. Indonesian passport holders will be prioritized at airports and be able to apply for a 10-year frequent traveler visa. So this offers 10-year visa validity, 10 years, making enormous differences in removing bureaucratic impediments to our closer relationship. That, again, was what Albo said about it. Yeah, look, we already had basically a Indonesia Free Trade Agreement, I don't think it was called that, at the end of last year, that meant many more Indonesian foreign workers coming here, taking Australian jobs. Now we've got more icing on the cake to ramp it up even further. How great. All right, so more stuff on foreign workers. Oh, okay. So this is, what firm? Oh, Jesus Christ. The Cheesecake Shop. So the Cheesecake Shop has been accused of not only paying all of their staff the minimum wage, but paying less. than half that amount per hour. And that, as you can imagine, is that half the minimum wage that they're paying is paid to foreign workers. Okay. So if you're actually an Australian citizen, you'll get the minimum wage. But if you're there as a foreign worker, you'll get half the minimum wage. Anyway, look, that's not across the board. These are just, and they are just allegations, so far. However, we know that practices like this have been put into place at places like 7-Eleven. So it's not uncommon for these kind of big franchises to do things like this. So you do have the Retail Workers Union coming out with all these former workers of the Cheesecake Shop talking about the various ways of doing this. One of the ways is cash handback. So that means they are actually paid whatever they're owed into their bank account, but then they're asked to hand those wages back. I don't know about the other methods that they're using here. I know that like fruit pickers and stuff, they'll just charge them excessive, like board fees, accommodation fees, that kind of thing. These places where, obviously there is no accommodation, they just get them to hand back cash. And in the case where they don't hand back the cash, they say, well, we're going to report you to Home Affairs then, and you'll be sent back home. It's,
Listen here, Manjeet, we're gonna send you back to whatever fucking shit-filled hole you crawled out of unless you give us back half the wages. As to why I put on an American accent there, I don't know.
Well, I mean, it did sort of start with Mexicans, I think,
Yeah.
Famously anyway. I mean, exploiting cheap foreign labor is not a new thing at all.
No.
You can go back to the Kanakas here.
Yeah,
go back to Jews enslaving Africans.
This is a very, very old practice. But also, that's one of the things I want to make a fucking touching point on. When I say like I give a shit about working wages and stuff like that, it's not me being some pinko left-leaning parasite or something like that. I care about those things, one, so that like the citizens of like whatever nation can actually, thrive and live out normal, well-adjusted lives, but also so businesses don't hire brown people.
Yeah. I mean, if
we shore that shit up, they're just not going to fucking hire them. Because the only reason why this capitalist process even deals in these people in the first place is because they're cheaper.
Well, if you can pay them half the minimum wage, then obviously you're going to hire them over a white Australian citizen.
Yeah.
Obviously. So yeah, we're baking very perverse incentives into this cheesecake, you could say.
We're making shit cakes.
Yes. All right. So, refugees. So the federal court has ruled...
future workers.
Yeah. That while it may not have been humane to detain a Kurdish Iranian refugee in hotel rooms for more than a year, it was legal. All right. So... this was a guy, what's his name? Mustafa Azmitabar. They refer to him as mobs.
Sounding shit.
Yeah.
A bunch of YPK sounding shit.
So, he originally came to Christmas Island, then he was transferred to Manus Island. And when he came to Australia, he was put into hotel detention for 14 months. Now, he obviously doesn't have the money to do this himself.
No.
So you had refugee advocacy groups who took this matter to the federal court. But, yeah, guess what? They said, no, under our existing laws, that actually is legal. It doesn't really matter where you house the people. If it is determined that you are to be in detention, we can put you in a hotel or whatever. And, by the way, wouldn't you rather be in a hotel than a detention center?
People pay money for hotels to go to other places.
Right.
You just don't bring a black light in there, but like, I was gonna say the more I learn about fucking Kurds, the more I realize that Saddam Hussein was fucking right. Yeah,
the Kurds are very much just, they're exploited as pawns in the Middle East. Like, when an Arab dictator, like, is doing something that we don't like, we just very often say he's killing Kurds, those poor, oppressed minority people over there, and we've got to go in and help them.
Is there some way, because this godforsaken country doesn't allow me to get cheese curds, is there some way that I can trade pounds of Kurdish people for pounds of cheese curds? Because that would be a very profitable fucking trade.
Maybe. The European Union probably would have restrictions on what you could call them, though.
No.
Probably couldn't call them cheese curds.
But also, Kurds are the closest group to to Arab Jews. I don't remember what they're called again. They're not Sephards, it's Spanish. What the fuck are they?
What, you mean the Mizrahi Jews?
Mizrahi, yes, the Mizrahi. They're literally like Mizrahi are completely genetically separated from basically every other group in the Middle East except for Kurds.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. Yeah, I was always sort of unsure of because, like, I mean, I assume though that Kurds must be very intermixed though, because whenever I've seen a Kurdish person, they always just look like an Arab to me. So. I mean, that has to be.
Have you seen a Mizrahi?
Well, the Yemeni is a Mizrahi, and he basically just looks like an Arab as well, I think.
Yeah. No,
That's what Syrian girl said. She's like, he's not a Jew, he's an Arab. She said that to us when we interviewed her.
Sweetie. I'm sorry, sweetie, but He's a Jewish person, and you shouldn't don't allow him to slip into another group. That's how you cause problems.
Well, look, the reason she says that is because she believes in the Khazar theory.
Oh.
So she basically says that there's no such thing as like a Mizrahi. That's just an Arab.
Put that fucking evil on the European continent. Thank you.
Yeah. Because that's essentially what they're doing. Is they're saying that even though the Khazar theory says that, like, they're originally Turkic, they're essentially saying, like, today's Jews, Ashkenazi Jews, are white. That most people who advocate the Khazar theory, that's basically what they're saying. Like, no, they're white people from Europe, which, no, it's not true.
No, thank you. We are not taking this either. We'll take the fact that, like, sometimes we're brutally warish and export that to other countries. But, like, no, we're not taking that shit. That is a different kind of evil. That is not our flavor of evil.
Okay, so, Brittany Higgins. A little bit of story here. I was reading a really good article on her last night, but we're going to save that for later. But anyway, it looks like Linda Reynolds might actually be suing her. I really fucking hope so. Now, this came from an Instagram post that Brittany posted not too long ago, where she said that through Linda Reynolds making various comments in the media, that this was resulting in a form of harassment. And, I mean, the idea, where Higgins gets the fucking gall to make these accusations is beyond me. Because everything that she's accusing these other people of is what she has been doing from the beginning. Doing things like harassment via the media, dragging people's name and reputation through the mud. She has been accusing Linda Reynolds of these things for actually just making very basic comments trying to defend herself in the media. So I am definitely supportive of this. It's not me saying I really like Linda Reynolds, because I don't. But it's about time. Well, because look, we've gone through how, there has been a bit of litigation involved here. She previously was going after David Shiraz for tweets, and we got a little bit on that as well. Of course, you had Bruce Lehrman, who was going after various media outfits. But everyone is asking the question, why isn't anyone going after her? Why isn't anyone suing her? Now, still, unfortunately, we don't have any indication that Bruce Lehrman is going to sue her. I still really hope he fucking does. But anyway, it looks like Linda Reynolds is going to be doing this. So, anyway, about these recent Instagram posts, she said, "Yesterday my lawyers sent a concerns notice to Miss Brittany Higgins. That was a private communication which she has chosen to make public. Okay, so yeah, part of what she issued on Instagram was a private conversation between the two of them, well, and the lawyers. Ever since Miss Higgins first made her allegations of rape public, I have been the target of unwarranted criticism and abuse. Despite her repeated defamation of my character, until now I have not taken any action against her personally, even though I considered her words to be a breach of our previous settlement agreement. Part of that, by the way, was the agreement that was settled in the Department of Finance, where she was given over $2.5 million. Yesterday, Miss Higgins made yet another defamatory post about me. I have had enough. I will not tolerate being defamed by her or anybody. So there you go. Those look like fighting words, meaning that she is going to take her to court for, these Instagram posts where she continues to attack Lina Reynolds. By the way, some of what those posts involve is accusing Lina Reynolds of covering up an investigation into the alleged rape.
You know, if Linda Reynolds put me in a social media defense situation, I would shitpost on a timeline so hard that even the moderation team would know how much I hate her. Strictly in a social media defense situation.
Right. Now, the other thing here, I mentioned before that Lina Reynolds was going after David Shiraz for a series of tweets that he made. As far as I know, all of those tweets have been taken down. And again, for very much the same thing, accusing Lina Reynolds of playing politics and trying to cover up and hide aspects of the alleged rape that, would hinder an investigation into it. She actually announced and filed the writ for this litigation to take place back in January of this year, so, 6 months ago. Since that time, they have not been able to locate David Shiraz. Okay? He has
check the casino.
He has been able to hide them. Yeah, they should have looked there. He has been able to hide for 6 fucking months. Because if you know how litigation works, you have to actually serve the papers on the person in order for the proceedings to begin. So he's just been hiding the whole time. Now, they tried to actually issue the papers to Brittany Higgins' lawyers. And you know who Brittany Higgins' lawyers are? Arnold Bloch Liebler. Liebler's outfit.
Fuck!
Okay. I actually only realized that when I read this article. Okay? I'm sorry I missed over that fact before. But yes, Arnold Bloch Liebler is a partnership between Arnold Bloch and
right
Mark
under
Liebler.
our fucking nose.
They are the ones representing Brittany Higgins. So anyway, they issued a statement saying, no, we cannot accept those those papers on behalf of David Shiraz because we are representing Brittany Higgins. We are not representing her fiancé. So they did apply to the Supreme Court here to issue what they call substituted servers. So that means if you are not able to track down the person, the court can actually give leave for you to officially have them served on them without physically giving them the papers. Now, still though, you have to be in a situation where it is reasonable to believe that the individual is aware that that action has been brought upon them. Now, with the amount of media coverage that there is on this, obviously that would be the case. There is no way in hell that David Shiraz does not know about this. So that has been granted. So David Shiraz has now officially been served, and it means that he will have to fight this out in the Supreme Court.
Did he get one last go at roulette before he got served?
I don't know. I mean, look, we don't even know where he is right now. We literally don't know where he is because they have been trying to locate him.
Someone check under the table.
So we don't know if he's at. I wonder if they did go to the casino.
You squeeze between the one-armed bandits, there's a small crevice between them.
Yeah. They might have had to go and search the casinos he was known to frequent.
If I was a fucking PI, I absolutely fucking would.
Yeah.
That's not a joke, and by the way, what we're getting at is he is a fucking massive gambling addict and bankrupted his previous wife.
He did.
Yeah.
You can still see the screenshots, actually, from... she made them on Facebook talking about how she got cleaned out. Basically, her life savings were stolen by David Shiraz. He pissed them up at the Canberra casino. Something people don't talk about. Even during those, 4 or 5 days where he did get a bit of attention, when it was finally revealed, just how much of this whole saga he was orchestrating from behind the scenes. You did get a few write-ups on David Shiraz, profiling him. All the articles that I went over during that point in time, none of them mention that fact, that he cleaned out his former wife. Even in the Australian, where they don't seem to like Brittany Higgins very much, they still neglected that fact. Okay. We'll go on to crime now. Now, it is in Queensland, even though they have had a slight reduction in crime since they reintroduced some of, the harsher, you could say, law and order, I would just say less lenient law and order measures. But anyway, things are still getting worse at the youth detention centres, right? So it's not just WA where this is happening. But look, it's the same things that are going on here. It's a shortage of staff, and staff are leaving because, ironically, because of a shortage of staff in the first place.
Yeah.
There's a shortage of staff. If you have a shortage of staff, that fact alone leads to a further shortage of staff later on.
Because of worsening conditions.
Yeah, because the conditions get worse, and that simply just incentivizes more people to leave. One of the things that causes that is rolling lockdowns. If you don't have the proper ratio of staff to detainee, well, that means that, say, one wing of them, where you've got, say, 8 detainees, has to be locked down, say, for 4 hours, and then that officer then can then go and take over that wing that was been locked down, and so another wing has to be locked down.
Okay.
So they take turns.
I think I have a solution. Hear me out. Escape New York type situation.
Well, what it is,
we're already halfway there.
So they are reporting now at the detention centres in Queensland. So these are the facilities at Brisbane, West Moreton, and Townsville. And they're saying that there are almost daily attacks there, some of which have involved serious injuries such as broken bones and even brain injuries. Now, as far as I know, those serious injuries are yet to be inflicted upon staff. It's mainly just, detainees beating up on each other that is causing that. However, at that last riot that we had in Banksia Hill, one of the officers got a fractured skull. Okay.
Wasn't there a woman out in the yard and they literally just beat her unconscious?
Yes, it was a woman. It was a woman, yeah, who that happened to.
I hope it was a bulldog.
I don't know, man. I'm still amazed, when I see cops walking down the street and I see, a thin, short woman who is not a bulldyke, you can tell she's just a regular straight woman, and you just kind of think, man, how would you go trying to arrest me? You're
going to scream taser and put a bullet in my head.
Yeah, that's the only way she could actually do it. For the vast majority of male offenders out there, there is no way that she alone could restrain someone. And it's very much the same thing for youth detention or for adult detention. There's just so many of these women who just should not be hired in the first place.
It was a Sam. I know you don't exactly like Sam Hyde's kind of comedy. But there was a Sam Hyde little thing where he was just recording. I think it was for one of his little Hyde Wars things. He was like, "Look, man, if you ever get pulled over and as a female cop, I'm praying for you. I'm praying for you because she is there's only one course of action that she has, because she can't de-escalate and she can't restrain you or really manage you in any meaningful way. She's only got one recourse, which is to draw her firearm and shoot you. So, if you get pulled over by a female cop, man, I hope you're wearing a bulletproof vest.
Yeah, and there are incidents of that happening. The female officers are much more likely to, or it can just be something less like reaching for the capsicum spray, because she knows that with her arms alone, she's not going to be able to do it. And there's a lot of like cringe, attempted arrest videos you can watch on YouTube. I remember I posted one a few weeks ago in the UK, where it was a female officer and a male officer. No, two male officers. This is what was so pathetic about it. They were trying to restrain a black guy who kept like kicking around the whole time while they're trying to cuff him. They couldn't do it. And then there was one cop who was standing around, so he's not attempting to arrest the person. But all these people who were watching every now and then would jump in and try to stop the cops from arresting this person.
Yeah.
And the other cop who was walking around was doing nothing about it. He was just standing there watching them. I couldn't fucking believe it. It was just so embarrassing watching it.
I remember this video out of Mall of America where like literally it was a black dude, hands completely full of shoe boxes. And there was these two, like obviously they call the cops, and Mall of America is pretty fucking big, so like, you know, by the time he got to the front entrance to the place and was leaving, the cops had arrived. And then two female cops, literally like fucking come out of a cruiser, and this black dude literally just fucking shoves them to the ground and keeps walking. They're not gonna fucking do shit. They're not gonna taser him. They're not really gonna fucking shoot him because he's black. So like, yeah, like, what do you do? Nothing.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's clown world.
We need to return to tradition where cops were just large Scottish and Irishmen who had drinking problems.
Yeah. Return to that, and you'll have an orderly detention center. You will. Don't have any Sheilas working there.
Fucking faith in Bagheera Gordon. If I have to come down here and fucking deal with your nappy ass again, you're gonna be leaving with no fucking teeth.
Yeah, and you know, they respond to that.
Yeah.
They do. They respond to that. That's the way they used to do it, and it worked.
I'm going to fucking have a nip of my whiskey because I'm sick of your shit.
Okay.
I tell you what, the crackers going down your fucking skull.
Oh, okay. Now, we can't, whenever we talk about this stuff, we can't avoid talking about Banksia Hill here in WA. There's more and more problems just keep happening here.
It's just a running riot.
Yeah, well, look, what I just mentioned before, that is, you know, the rolling lockdowns, which they have to do because there's no staff. The only way you can avoid this is if you break the rules concerning the ratio of staff to detainee, meaning that, you know, I believe it's 1 on 8. You would have to just change that to like 1 on 10 or something.
Yeah. Which
obviously means if they decide to kick up a stink, you're going to have 10 detainees on your case rather than 8. And they're much more likely to, like beat the crap out of you, steal your keys and make an escape attempt. It is an extremely dangerous thing to do. Nonetheless, WA Supreme Court has actually taken this really extraordinary step of barring the state from continuing to put young detainees into solitary confinement. Now, solitary confinement simply just means their cell, okay? That's considered solitary. Now, obviously, you know, they have to be locked down at some points. You know, they sleep in the cell.
Yeah.
So what they're referring to here is the extended times. So there were reports that some of them were in their cells for 20 hours a day, and they just reported that to be unlawful. Now, I'm not sure, like, even though they've announced this ban from doing it, I don't know if they can really implement it, though. Because, like I said, the only other alternative is to change the ratio, and that is illegal as well. So, like, what are you supposed to do? The only thing you can do here is actually get more staff so that they don't have to have the lockdowns. So
I don't know how that's going to. You need to.
I don't know how that's going to play out.
During yarn time, you need to send out about 5 or 6 guys just to go and beat on these people, or these kids.
Yeah, well, look, the riots only ever happen when the detainees can smell weakness. I don't think it's any coincidence that after there's been a big media beat up on a cop or like poor practices, like the Four Corners documentary that we went over. As soon as that Four Corners documentary aired, which focused on Banksia Hill and Dondale in the Northern Territory, you know, basically just demonizing the officers there, even though they only had 3 incidents, all of which it was the detainees' fault, except maybe one. Right after that, riots happen. The detainees know, okay? They've got TVs in their cells. They watch these shows. They know about it. And they know that when the officers are on edge, in other words, when they're afraid that the media is going to get on their back and ruin their life and their reputation, they take a softly approach. And they're much more lenient. And the detainees, they pick up on that in an instant. And that's when they start to do things like flood their toilets and smash up their cells and organize for keys to be stolen and a breakout to happen.
Hey, here's some advice to detainees. If you want to know when the security guards are, weak and ready for you to riot on them, just wait until they give you a bucket of fucking KFC.
Right.
That's when they're primed and ready to have their skull cracked in.
All right, so let's go to party politics now. We'll start with One Nation. So Pauline Hanson has hired 2 barristers to defend her against Marine Faruqi's charge of racial vilification, where she told her to piss off back to Pakistan. That is Brett Walker and Sue Christenthau. So they're both experienced defamation lawyers. Oh, no, sorry. Brett Walker is a constitutional lawyer. And Sue Christenthau is a defamation lawyer. She was the lawyer who was supposed to represent Christian Porter, if we remember that case.
Yeah.
When he went to sue Louise Milligan and the ABC. I believe it was settled out of court in the end. But Sue Christenthau was forbidden from, God, I can't remember the court involved at the time. She was not allowed to represent Christian Porter because she was seen to have had a conflict of interest. Really what it was at the time was Christenthau was seen as one of the best defamation lawyers in the country, and they simply did not want her representing Christian Porter because she was likely to win. But anyway, they're going to be arguing that Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act, which is the part of the act that Marine Faruqi is invoking to make these claims of defamation and racial vilification, they're going to argue that it is unconstitutional. So they're saying that that section improperly impinges on the implied freedom of political communication that is protected in the Constitution. So that is why they have hired a defamation lawyer and a constitutional lawyer. So at least, simply from a legal point of view, it looks like Pauline is hiring kind of the best of the best in the country here. So that is promising. She must have been able to raise the funds. She was doing things like auctioning knitted jumpers and stuff that she had made. I don't know if you saw that. They usually have ways of doing that.
Yeah.
So I guess they must have been able to raise the funds to be able to hire them, because I don't imagine they would have been cheap.
Someone is missing a really, really funny political cartoon opportunity where Pauline Hanson in a fucking chippy refuses to fry like Pakistani Samoas.
You remember that, like, why does Pauline Hanson like crustaceans? Because she thinks they're crushed Asians.
Yeah.
I think I heard that one back in primary school.
Hey, buddy, leave a Chinaman around an industrial lathe for long enough and you'll find a crushed Asian.
Yeah, you will.
Those videos are brutal.
Maureen Faruqi. She said, this is Michael Bradley. Hold on, is this, Michael Bradley is the lawyer for, Maureen Faruqi. So, he said, most of us understand that a decent society necessitates some outer boundaries on free speech. If Senator Hanson wishes to argue that the Constitution removes the boundaries and guarantees a right to publicly vilify people because of their race, then we look forward to having that fight. All right, so it's on. It doesn't look like an out-of-court settlement, not going by these statements that have been made by each party. So, yeah, get out the popcorn. We got another one to watch. Okay, on to the federal Liberal Party. We've got a former Liberal staffer called Natalie Bainey. She told a Sydney court that women should beware the party as it has ruined her reputation and left her with serious mental health issues. Where am I getting this story from? The ABC, of course. They're trying to use it as another example of women inside the Liberal Party being treated like shit. It's funny, the only, proper times you find that is where they were stalked by, left-wing NGOs. Like when, Get Up targeted that woman and called her a whore and stalked her on the way home from work.
Shit, that would get us in jail if we did it.
Right. But anyway, she is, Natalie Bainey is suing the Liberal Party, suing their New South Wales division and the State Director, Chris Stone, alleging she was blocked from pre-selection for the Sydney seat of Reid. And this is for the 2019 election. Jesus. So, look, I don't know the details here, but it just sounds like sour grapes to me. Now, it was a male. I'm sorry, I don't know the name of who it was who ended up getting that pre-selection. But, I mean, for God's sake, how many times have we seen female picks ahead of males?
Yeah.
And not just that, but, they boast about it later on. When the pre-selection is about to start, you've got everyone, including the leaders, saying, we need to make sure we have a woman who wins this. And then when a woman does get it, they say, isn't this a win for diversity? Now that is actually a very open display of, yes, discrimination against men, right? That is them openly saying, yeah, we need to have women over men in the party. This seems to be one of those very rare examples where a woman didn't get it, but it still doesn't look like there was any motivation in that respect. Dare I say, this was simply a choice made on merit. Now, what I find also amusing about this story, though, is that in her complaint that she issued to, the Sydney, I think it's just the Magistrates Court in Sydney, is that she's actually implicated Jeroen Finkelstein, right? That is, who was Scott Morrison's principal private secretary, effectively the chief of staff, and that he was the one who was playing a huge role in this, particularly when it came to the pre-selection process in the seat of Reid. Now, it is true that Scott Morrison intervened in the New South Wales decision to make, what they call captain's picks.
Yeah.
But in this case, she's actually pointing the finger directly at Finkelstein here. Yeah, in that respect, I think there probably was something going on, but I don't think it was an anti-woman thing. That's what she's trying to say. She said, ladies beware, the Liberal Party does not even respect women enough to fabricate intellectual scandals. It will always relate to something sexual. Jesus. Oh, just typical stuff.
Maybe because there fucking isn't one to begin with, you fucking broad.
Right. Okay. So, we've got a by-election coming up in the seat of Fadden. This is a federal by-election. And this was because you had the former coalition minister Stuart Robb, who resigned earlier this year. Now, Stuart Robert. Stuart Robert was also former social services minister. That has led a lot of people to say that the findings of the Royal Commission into RoboDebt was very conveniently released just before this by-election. Right. That was actually for one of the men implicated in it. It's deliberately designed to kind of hurt the coalition as they go into this by-election. So anyway, early voting is actually already open. This is a seat in the northern Gold Coast. Postal votes close next Wednesday. And the Liberal Party does actually hold this with a margin of over 10%. All right. So they're running a Gold Coast councillor called Cameron Caldwell. Now, when you've got a seat that you have a 10% margin on, well, you might as well not have a candidate, actually. There's not much point. So even though, they tried to kind of hurt the Liberal Party's prospects here, it's not really going to make too much of a difference.
That's the seat where you send someone you want to go away.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I mean, usually what they do, if they do actually run a candidate, they run a really, really shit one that no one ever expects to actually get in. Okay, now, to the Senate, you've got the Liberal Senator Jared Rennick has actually been kicked off the party's Senate ticket, or at least he's been bumped down in the pecking order here. So he's a Queensland senator, and some people might recognize this guy from the guy who really went against all the COVID restrictions. Yeah. And he even did some anti-vaxxer stuff in his speeches under parliamentary privilege. So, he was sort of seen, I guess, as a renegade minister. He was the favorite of, people like Abiy Yemeni, actually, who said that he was a real hero for freedom in the country. Look, I don't mind the guy. Some of his stuff on vaccines was probably a little extreme for my taste, because I think he didn't just talk about COVID vaccines. He talked about vaccines generally. But anyway,
I'm not gonna lie, man, dude. Fucking after and being like a farmer guy myself, looking into the history of vaccines, I'm just like, oh wait, the disease was already dying out, and then you just claim to fucking win on an already dying out disease. Wow. Round of applause for you.
I know that's often I mean, certainly in the case of polio, that's the case. But then you've got areas of the world where, you even had, there's parts of Scotland where they have, a bit of an anti-vaxxer community, I guess you could say. I don't know why, but for some reason in Scotland, they've got a lot of people
It's the Scottish. If you tell them to do something, they won't do it out of spite. It's an entire race of people motivated by spite.
Maybe that's it. But you did start to see a resurgence in measles and polio in those areas. Okay, so yes, while you might be right in that those diseases are on the decline, that doesn't mean that vaccines didn't play a role in reducing.
Yeah, polio fucking shows up because you have these fucking third world people that fucking show up with polio. But measles is one of those things. Measles and shingles are exactly the same disease. It's literally the same virus.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I know chicken pox is very similar to shingles.
It is. And measles.
It's a form of herpes, isn't
it? Not really. It's basically, and this is going from memory, I might Google myself just in case I'm lying with an agenda. But basically it's the same disease, it just shows up differently, and it depends, because when you age, your immune system kind of changes gears, to deal with cell senility. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's not actually necessarily lethal, and doesn't really affect your function to, like, go out into society. So those diseases are forever diseases. Like, they just exist. You can be immunized for measles, get measles, become, like, 60-something, and then get shingles.
Yeah, it kind of comes back.
Yeah. But they're just forever diseases. Polio is a bit different, obviously. But polio comes from people who are racial carriers of it. So there's no effect on their body from carrying polio, and then they meet people who are actually susceptible to the effects of polio. But the thing is, polio doesn't want to be in a population. Well, saying like it doesn't want, it doesn't have will. It's something that is debatable if it's alive or not. But it doesn't want to be present in a population that is susceptible to it, because that, again, the main goal of every single virus is to get as much biomass as possible.
Yeah, well, look, just doing a quick Google search says chickenpox and herpes are not the same thing. However, chickenpox
kind of
it's caused by the varicella zoster virus, which is a herpes virus.
Yeah.
So they're related, I guess.
Yeah.
Not exactly
it's not the same thing. It's not like the Hep C, Hep B, and Hep C, Hep A, Hep B, and Hep C situation, which is like the main herpes. And by the way, everyone has fucking herpes. Everyone has herpes. Herpes is one of the most successful viruses ever.
Oh, okay.
If you've ever had a mouth ulcer, congratulations, you've got herpes.
Okay. Yeah, we need to stop stigmatizing it so much.
Obviously, there is common versions of herpes, and there is less fucking common versions of herpes. Don't go around thinking your fucking, like, mutilated genitals are fine. Thank you.
Yeah, that's true. Certainly avoid those if you can.
Yeah.
Because once you got it, it doesn't go away. It keeps coming back. Yeah.
You're just suppressing it.
So, look, this Gerald Rennick getting bumped down the Senate ticket, this basically means he won't get elected, by the way, unless there's some miracle. And the way the Liberal Party is tracking at the moment, that doesn't seem likely. But this came from the LNP national conference that they had in Queensland recently. And this is actually seen as a blow to Peter Dutton's authority, because Peter Dutton actually gave him a written endorsement. He said, Senator Rennick has demonstrated he is not afraid to take up the right in order to defend the values of the LNP. I ask you to support Gerald as part of my team. Well, that was defeated. Now, remember that the Queensland branch of the Liberal Party, or the LNP, is actually considered to be the most hard right branch. It's where Peter Dutton comes from. It's also where the National Party is more dominant than the Liberal Party. They're called the Liberal National Party. That's what LNP stands for. However, it's actually the Nationals who have the upper hand in that sort of unity ticket. So, despite that, they still managed to knock out this guy who is considered to have far-right views. Again, that's how the ABC described it. He has far-right views on issues such as immigration, vaccine injuries, and renewable energies. So, I guess he was too far to the right, even for the LNP.
Think that's bad. Wait till you get a load of me.
Okay, now final thing on the Libs here. Well, actually, this is more related to Labor, but I'm glad there's actually some data on this, because up until now, what I had to say in this was merely anecdotal, and that is that Anthony Albanese has been shutting down question time early and refusing to be held accountable in Parliament. Now, the anecdotes I only had actually
shit shoved in, and not the way that he likes.
Yeah. Well, I found this to be more the case in press conferences. I was just noticing that he was taking less questions. He was giving shorter answers. And then, once he kind of got irritated enough, he would just say, okay, guys, that's it, and he'd walk off. And I don't think it's any coincidence that, his head is getting whiter, the ball patch is getting bigger. I think the pressures of the job are getting to him. But in Parliament, so according to the Liberal Party's analysis of the second last week in Parliament before the winter recess, the Prime Minister allowed only 18 questions from the opposition during question time over 3 sitting days. By contrast, Labor asked 25 questions of the Morrison government in the final 3-day sitting period before the last year's federal election. So the coalition has also claimed that 40% of question times, so 15 out of 37, were shut down by Albanese before 3:15 p.m.
Damn.
So yeah, we've actually got data on this, that he is basically just cutting things short all the time in Parliament. He's
we have the receipts of your bullying.
Yeah, we have receipts of this guy just shutting down scrutiny and accountability in Parliament. And like I said, he's definitely doing it in question time, press conferences as well. Which back in the day, like before he was leader, he would never do that. He was always like very open to questions. Okay. Alright, so look, there are increasing rumors that a leadership challenge is going to be mounted against David Littleproud from the National Party. Now, again, like I did find this somewhat surprising. Maybe I shouldn't be too surprised, but again, they're talking about Barnaby Joyce. I guess he would have to be the most popular leader that they've had for a long time. Probably, I don't know, since John Anderson or maybe even Tim Fisher before him. Of course, he was successful in a leadership challenge against Michael McCormick. Michael McCormick was always sort of doomed to fail. He was a guy who just never seemed confident in front of the cameras. He was also seen to be a moderate. Barnaby Joyce is one of these guys considered to be far right. I don't know about that. He was there supporting the Tamil family from day one, and actually saying that if it was a white family, they would be treated very different. Okay? That should tell you all you need to know.
But yeah, they should.
Now, the reason why it's said that the opposition is mounting against David Littleproud is because there's an internal revolt for failing to secure an ongoing commitment from the Liberals to fund $30 billion worth of priority projects for the Nationals in regional areas. Now, why was this commitment made, this $30 billion commitment for priority projects? This was said to be the deal done in return for the Nationals supporting net zero emissions by 2050. Remember, that is still coalition policy. But I have to remind people of this. This deal with the coalition was done between Scott Morrison and Barnaby Joyce. Okay? It was not done between Peter Dutton and David Littleproud. So, again, I'm just saying, well, look, if you don't like this deal, why would you want to go and bring back the man who actually signed off on it in the first place? Now, on the other hand, you could say, well, look, we made this deal and we're not getting anything out of it, okay? Well, look, people were telling you that from the beginning, okay? This is what always happens. The Liberal Party, the inner-city dominant party in the coalition, ends up making deals with the National Party to get them on board and then just breaking promises that they've given them in return for them signing onto those deals. It happens time and time again. The deregulation of sugar and dairy, the gun buyback scheme, now net zero. The Liberals always promise them something and then don't give them anything, which is why you had so many people break away from the National Party, like Bob Katter. So this is another example. And from the beginning, I'm pretty sure Andrew Bolt, for example, at the time was saying this. He was like, all of that money that the Liberal Party is offering you to support net zero, you're not going to get it in the end. You're going to be screwed over. And that's what we're seeing. And so I really
see that, like, we've been hammering on, like, fucking, like, green energy and et cetera and blah, blah, blah. You see that they're, like, literally fucking rolling out NASA tech from the fucking 60s to make that battery program feasible?
No, I have not seen that.
Iron air batteries. I'm not even fucking joking.
Yeah, well, look, I hope that this $30 billion worth of project isn't, harebrained green energy stuff. I actually imagine most of it wouldn't be, considering the nature of the deal involved. If you're giving net zero, you don't want to pile on top of that with more green energy crap. But, yeah, look, whatever happens here, even if Barnaby does come back to the top job, I guarantee they're still going to get screwed in this deal. It's not going to happen. And by the way, with Peter Dutton, the guy of the far right, supposedly from Queensland, why is it that a year into his leadership, net zero by 2050 is still official coalition policy? Why hasn't he wound that back? He can make speeches of the IPA endorsing nuclear power, but he can't actually repudiate net zero by 2050. Why not? All right. Oh, Jesus. Okay, so the path to treaty in Queensland. So remember, this is the step after the voice. So they're currently negotiating compensation, that's what treaty means, all right? It's money to Aboriginal tribes. How you define those Aboriginal tribes is another question, but that effectively is what it is. It's just handing money from the government.
Well, that's weird because last time I understood what a treaty was, it means that I don't shoot you and you don't shoot me.
Yeah, but you see, we're already at that stage. It's like where we're not actually at war with each other. But before that's supposed to happen, you're supposed to actually say what the parties get. And apparently what we get is to stay here on Aboriginal land. And what
we get fucked.
Yeah. So the LNP in Queensland supports it. Okay? They actually do support this. So the opposition leader in Queensland is David Crisafulli, and he's right there behind Palaszczuk with this path to treaty legislation, as it is called. Now, the federal LNP and federal nationals do not like this. And believe it or not, that includes David Littleproud. And he's actually come out and said, well, look, you're hurting the Liberal Party, the coalition's official no stance on the Indigenous voice, because it seems a little contradictory to say, all right, we oppose the voice, but we actually support something even more extreme, which is massive compensation payments under a treaty. So, yeah, naturally. He's
business deal. You get more gives, and I get railed up Main Street.
Yeah. So Littleproud said, I find no circumstances that I can see our party room ever accepting a treaty. We don't believe a treaty is necessary. We believe our great nation has come together and will continue to come together and work together. Oh, man. Did you really have to word it that way? He just wants to talk about how it's divisive because it puts one group against another. Why don't you actually just talk about the money that's involved here? And, you can still talk on racial lines a little bit by talking about how many white people get paid out here. Because, as I said, how you define an Aboriginal tribe is another question. There are a shitload of rent-seeking white people who get in on this stuff too, many of whom just claim to be Aboriginal, but they're not. Right. There's a huge element of that.
Well, again, we actually covered it, that fucking, very obviously Aboriginal, quote-unquote, country singer. He was just like, can I submit a DNA test to prove I'm Aboriginal? No. Where's your piece of paper that says you're Aboriginal? Is like, they literally can't fucking acknowledge, even while doing racial policy, they can't acknowledge that race is actually a real thing and not just some kind of identification.
That's right, yeah. I mean, that's why they have to prove it through all these other mechanisms, even though you could really easily streamline the process with a DNA test. But that reminds people of Nazi Germany, therefore you can't have it. That's the reason why. It's so silly, but yeah. Okay, so one last thing from this LNP conference. One of the motions that was passed or, recommended or whatever you could say was to do with the ABC So it said that a future Dutton government should force the ABC to become a patriotic broadcaster and also banned gender dysphoria surgery for children pending a nationwide review. Should also move to nuclear power under resolutions. These were resolutions that were passed by the Liberal National Party. They also talked about the pushing of gender ideology by the ABC and in public schools. Okay, all of that sounds great to me. But will it actually happen? Somehow doubt it. I think it shows that, that there still are good people at the grassroots level in the Liberal Party, in the National Party, but the leadership just doesn't listen to them. That's all. And that's why I say to those people, why don't you come and join us instead?
Just become a Nazi. They're going to call you that anyway.
Yeah, that's right. And you might not even be a nationalist. But if you just spend a couple of months with us, we'll turn you into one. All right.
We've got the best conversion camps known to man.
Yeah.
The fucking world.
All right, so I guess maybe here's a little bit of good news from the Liberal Party in South Australia. But you've got the Southeast MP Nick McBride, who has left the Liberal Party. He claims that dark forces in party factions have created an environment of disunity and backstabbing. So he says that the South Australian branch is now completely consumed with factionalism and battles between those different factions. But he is from the moderate faction. He believes he's being turfed out by the Conservatives. Now, that is a bit of a joke in South Australia because, believe it or not, the South Australian branch is even more moderate or small L liberal than the Victorian branch. But, as we've covered before, there has been an attempt to sort of revive the Conservative elements. And part of that has been these pro-life demonstrations that they've had. And apparently the leader of the Liberal Party there, whose name is David Spears, not the insiders guy, but the Scottish guy he's only like 38 or something, he's pretty young, is actually said to be of that Conservative faction and sort of trying to revitalize them. Now, I don't know how successful he's going to be. The last conference that they had, it looked like he didn't really get anywhere. He wasn't able to kind of recruit any more people or get more Conservatives into pre-selection. But the other thing is, they haven't been able to turn around since the last election, where they were deliberately, they were just tearing up the membership of Christian Conservatives who were joining the Liberal Party because they were accused of branch stacking. All right. Now, branch stacking, I think, really is only a thing when you have people paying for members' memberships to favour them. What was going on here was the Conservative elements and churches in South Australia were saying Christians need to join the Liberal Party, so go and do it. And that's what was happening. And I remember when we covered this at the time, it was 300 memberships were actually torn up. So I don't know, maybe by this guy, Nick McBride, leaving, maybe he has noticed a reverse in that trend. And maybe they're not ripping up those memberships anymore. And maybe there's somewhat of a comeback for the Conservative element in the South Australian Liberal Party. I don't know. We just got to watch out. Okay. So, just quickly on the Victorian Liberals here. We know that, definitely one of the litigation cases to keep your eye on is the one between John Pescuto and Maura Deeming. Maura Deeming suing him for defamation for saying that she sympathizes with and associates with Nazis. But we have here Kelly J. Keane. So this was the woman who actually came to do the speech here, opposing gender dysphoria surgery and gender ideology, all that stuff. And then as soon as she went
mutilating kids for a moment.
Yeah. So, and then that's when Thomas Sewell and other guys supposedly gate crashed the event. But anyway, Kelly J. Keane has accused John Pescuto of telling egregious lies that have put her safety and that of other women at risk. So this was an interview she gave to a Britain-based women's rights activist group. So remember, these people still call themselves feminists, but they're TERFs, trans-exclusionary
radical feminists.
Yeah. I don't know. They probably don't call themselves radical feminists, but I mean, they essentially are. They're fairly in line with what someone like Jim Mangria would say, even though they claim conservatives. But yeah, look, she is accusing him of whipping up, some pretty vile rhetoric against her. And I mean, that did somewhat, culminate in the, remember when she went to New Zealand? And she was just rushed by this fucking rabid crowd of thuggish lefties. I don't think they punched her or anything, but they certainly jostled and pushed her around.
They would have.
A lot. Oh, if they had the chance, absolutely they would. They would have killed her if they could. We know that's what they're like. Nothing in here about her taking legal action, though. Although you possibly could. Incitement of violence. All right? Like, if you go out there and you say stuff that whips a mob up into a fury, that is still illegal, and you can be prosecuted for that. So,
yeah, I assume she's right. Honestly, she does actually have a decent case. The problem is, having a decent case is one thing; having a judge that would actually hear it is the other.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Okay, the next story on the Tasmania Live is a bit boring. Let's go on. So the Warrandyte by-election. This is still in Victoria. This is another one actually where the Labor Party does not look like they're gonna run. So this is already held by the Liberal Party by 4.2%, 2%, held by Ryan Smith. So he's quitting, and you've got you had two really young candidates. I think they were both in their 20s actually. But they ended up going for a female Asian called Nicole Tae-Werner. I'm probably saying that wrong. And this was another case of a conservative leaving the party, and it looks like this was specifically because of how Moira Deeming was treated in the party. And so he's leaving, and now they're putting a young woman who is also Asian into this. So, yeah. Don't say the Liberal Party does not do diversity picks, because they absolutely do.
Mm.
Now, because of the fact that Labor already have a huge majority in the Victorian Parliament, it looks like they're not even going to run here. 4.2% is a pretty big margin. And, if they have to spend, one insider put it to the Australian, $500,000 on a seat they're guaranteed to lose, compared to using that $500,000 to winning another term in 2026, well, they're probably going to go with the latter. Okay. Now, let's talk about child sex offenders a little bit. Now, here's actually a good law, believe it or not, coming from the South Australian Labor government.
Oh.
This is a proposal for people who have been convicted of child sex offences, and that includes people who have been in possession of child pornography, to be banned from working with children completely.
Wait.
Now,
this isn't already fucking law?
Oh, yeah, I know. I mean, it should be, obviously. It should be.
The fuck?
Yeah, I know. But no, at the state level in South Australia, no, that ban is not in place. Not yet, anyway. Now, look, what sort of spurred this latest push was you had a guy in 2022. His name was Brendan Nazar. He's an Arab. He pleaded guilty to multiple counts of possessing child pornography. Now, during that time, that is the time that he was charged but not yet convicted, he continued working at McDonald's. He was then sentenced. I think he went to jail for a short time. And then he straight away went off to work at Coles, where many of his colleagues were teenagers. They were under 18. Now, that actually caused the Retail Workers Union to say, no, we don't want, pedophiles to be working with or have contact with other children, so you need to ban this. So that legislation is now being proposed by the Attorney General in South Australia. Okay, good. Now, but, 2 points to make on that. One was, what you said, which is
why haven't they done this already?
Well, that, but also, why don't we just extend this to homosexuals generally? I would make it so that, at the very minimum, homosexuals would not be allowed to work as teachers. Okay? Maybe working at Coles or something, that may be a little different. I'm not quite as hardcore as, what Stephen Wells on this is, where he says, basically, subject him to capital punishment. I'm not quite that far along. But look...
I'm there. I'm ready for this.
Okay, fair enough.
I've got the rope right here.
I won't signal too hard against those who are. But, look, I just want a case where, at the minimum... one of the reasons that fuels, opposition to a religious discrimination bill is because they want homosexuals to be able to work in Catholic schools. Okay? That's fucking bullshit. And dare I say, it's not just that they want to keep them out of those schools because it's against Catholic teaching. It's also just because they're more likely to be fucking noncing boys there. Okay? We see this happen again and again.
Noncing is another word for buggering, which is another word for sodomy, by the way.
Yeah. You know why I think that word is in my head at the moment? Just because of that stuff that's happening in the BBC.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that, but I kept seeing people on Telegram referring to them as the BBC noncing young boys. And most of the time it is quote consensual, unquote. Libertarians would call it that. Can the child consent? But from a legal perspective, it is certainly not consensual. It's statutory rape, and at minimum. Okay, fine. This is a good law to pass, but we need to go much further. Way further.
It's okay because I sniffed them out as being gay. They generally weren't gay before I, sexually assaulted them.
Yeah. Okay, now in Tasmania, they're finding that they've had a lot of public servants, so a lot of bureaucrats, who have been guilty of various child sexual abuse allegations. Since 2020, 48 have actually been fired for possessing it. Now, people involved in the public service here, so including the union, are saying, actually, that doesn't go far enough. You need to have a public registry. So if you've been found guilty of child sexual abuse charges, whatever they might be, whether it's sexual physical stuff or you just downloaded porn or whatever, you should be named and shamed up on a public registry on the internet. And and I guess I just kind of said the same thing. Why haven't we done this before? I think that
should be stock standard.
Yeah, it should be.
Also, ball-peen hammers are really, really cheap to buy from Bunnings. I'm not suggesting anything, but there's a sale going on or something. In a public registry, completely unrelated, but I'm just gonna, reiterate that ball-peen hammers are really cheap to buy.
That is true. Okay, so we'll go to multiple. National security. I'm reading too far ahead into the prep here. But it said Australia's new cybersecurity coordinator has confirmed multiple government departments and agencies have been affected by the massive HWL Ebsworth hack. Now, that HWL Ebsworth, they are this mega law firm, they're a multinational law firm that also deals with accounting and stuff. They were also the ones that helped negotiate Brittany Higgins' $2.5 million payout with the Department of Finance. Apparently, the hackers got over 1 terabyte of data. And you think about it, that's a shitload considering you're just talking about text. Word documents. Yeah, you're just talking about text. So that's a shitload. And already a lot of that has leaked onto the dark web. Now, all 4 big banks were involved in this, also the Federal Department of Health. So the more and more they look into this, the more and more outfits in Australia they realize have actually had data stolen from them. And they're still blaming it on Russian cyber criminals known as Alf V and Black Cat. Okay. I'm just always doubtful when they mention Russian hackers.
Yeah, always. Flavor of the month kind of stuff.
Yeah, every time there's a fucking hack, we blame it on Russian hackers. So there's been some ransom demands that have gone on. A lot of them are kind of phony, though. Sometimes it's people who were not even involved in the hack, and they still come out and, say, give us money, and nothing happens. But the more we realize just how much was stolen, the better chance there is that we're going to get some dirt. Westpac has been involved in their own child exploitation scandal before. And maybe even we've got details on Brittany Higgins, considering they may have gotten information on her as well. So, yeah, we'll look out for that. Okay, now, the Chinese government is upset with us again because we are apparently housing what they call Hong Kong fugitives. So ever since China started to sort of reassert their control over Hong Kong, they have issued international arrest warrants for, Hong Kong dissidents, I guess you would say. And apparently, I think only 2 of them are living in Australia. Now, I don't know if we have an extradition treaty with China, but thus far, the Australian government is refusing to cooperate with Chinese authorities. And
on paper we do, but we'd basically just retain these people as pawns for geopolitics.
Yeah, well, for stuff like this, because of the fact that Australia, stands against the heavy-handed tactics or whatever you call it, that China has been making, the various incursions into Hong Kong over the past 2 years or so, stuff like this, even if we do have an extradition order, we won't actually extradite them. But I mean, also, one of them is an Australian citizen who lives in Adelaide, for example. We're not exactly, this guy's a legal scholar. We're not going to just suddenly uproot him and send him back. I still think we should, because he doesn't belong here. I don't really care if there's an arrest warrant out for him or not. It's not our concern. Maybe he can go somewhere else.
It's why we also weren't fazed when China was setting up it is a breach of sovereignty to a degree. Those fake police stations that they set up. But but if you're coming over here to take away your criminals, fuck it.
Yeah, they do a better job at removing Chinese criminals from Australia than Australia does. So as you say, it is sort of undermining our sovereignty to an extent. But if you ask me, that's a small price to pay you're literally getting rid of Chinese criminals. So that's good. Which also undermines our sovereignty. So, I think it works out in the end.
This is a decent trade offer.
Yeah. Okay, now, oh God, in Victoria, we actually have, we just had opened the first free public egg and sperm bank. All right? So we do obviously have egg and sperm banks in the country, but they're not free and public. So this is designed, obviously, for people who want to access fertility services like IVF and become pregnant. So the Victorian government has put $120 million into that. Daniel Andrews, when he opened it, said that they expect to receive around 400 sperm donations and around 40 egg donations per year. which would amount to nearly 3,500 IVF cycles per year. I don't know how the hell the mathematics work out on that. I guess from just one sperm donor you can get multiple women pregnant, I'm assuming. Yeah. So yeah, about the mechanics of all of that.
I still agree with an old buddy of mine. Fucking IVF is just like a massive fucking problem.
Yeah, well, look, here's the main problem I have with this. And by the way, if you're thinking about earning money from this, you can't. The Australian laws regarding egg donation and sperm donation state that it must be altruistic. So, in other words, you can't profit from it. Unlike in America, where you can get paid for it, you can't in Australia. But yeah, look, here's the main problem I have. Who are the types of people who access IVF? It's people like Penny Wong's domestic partner, okay? It's lesbians, it's single mums, it's surrogates,
psychotics,
to gay male couples, and yes, then it's other people who are just like that. And, you know, maybe nature has made them infertile for a reason, and we try to get around it, and we try to cheat nature, and we resort to this.
If I've learned enough from Scottish and Irish mythologies, if you fuck with the fey creatures, also known as, you know, nature, bad things fucking happen.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, look, I'm sure there's still some cases where it's a good thing, but I would say most of the time, no. So I don't want this publicly funded. I'd summarize it as being, I'd say, being dysgenic and raising future freaks. Basically, particularly when homosexuals and single mums access it.
Yeah, I was going to say, even if you exclude, there's one of the big problems with IVF is, say even if you exclude like parental and social circumstances after birth and etc., which are also going to factor really fucking largely into this, they have like fucking weird problems and we're not even really sure why. They have problems with their hearts, they've got problems breathing, they've got basically immunological problems as well. There's a lot of research being done into this now that we've actually, the research is only being done now that we actually have a decent sample size for this group of people. But like, they've got problems across the fucking board.
Oh, okay. I actually wasn't really aware of that. Yeah. I mean, I'd assume it'd be a more risky than a normal pregnancy.
It's also not like, oh, like, you know, this is like, you know, there's a certain % chance of this happening. No, it's across the board. This is every single incidence.
Is it? Okay, yeah, because I was going to say, wouldn't it kind of, one of the reasons for that would be that, you know, it tends to be older women who access these services simply because of the fact that the older they are, the less fertile they are. And we know that older women have much more likely to have complications in pregnancy and give birth to autistic kids and stuff. But you're saying it's just around across the board.
It's across the board. There's like a current running theory they're testing right now that the fact that IVF technically its first stages of development are non-uteral, that they're thinking that might be a cause of it because that's literally the only thing that they can think of. But yeah, no, it's still being tested, but like, yeah, quite literally every single instance of an IVF baby has one of these conditions and they're not sure why.
Wow, okay. Doesn't sound good. Alright, another reason why Victoria is the most progressive state in the country. Okay, now, William Crowther. Have you heard of this guy? He was a premier of Tasmania.
Oh, that's why I haven't heard of him.
Well, I know you would have heard the story though, because he was a surgeon and a bone hunter.
Oh, the fucking head situation.
Yes, he is the guy who is accused of severing and stealing the head of William Lamb. Now, he was also known as King Billy, and by some accounts, he was the last full-blooded Aboriginal left in Tasmania, because as we know, they died from various diseases and stuff. They weren't genocided, by the way, but, so The reason why this story is getting a lot of attention is because there's a big bronze statue of William Crowther in Hobart City, and they're going to take it down. It's only a matter of time. The city council there have already voted for it to happen, and this is actually going to be the first time in Australian history where we have removed the statue of a political leader. So, we're moving in that direction of America. In America's case, they tend to just remove the statue of military leaders. Like
Lee.
Yeah, like Lee. But anyway, look out for more than this. This is the first domino to fall. And remember, Tasmania is not exactly, it's not Victoria, where, they gladly would have done this before they could have. In Tasmania, the only Aborigines they have there are like very, very diluted Aborigines. Most of them are like quadroons or even less. So they certainly don't have any full bloods left. This guy, King Billy, was said to be the last one. But yeah, it was said to have stolen it, for purposes of study,
It was quite literally preserved and then sent for study. It was sent to an institute for study because they literally...
It was sent to Britain, wasn't it?
Yes.
I think. Yeah.
It basically made a trip to Oxford Medical. Or like Oxford Medical before Oxford Medical was a fucking thing. But yeah, no, it was explicitly for study.
Right. And so that's what he was accused of. It wasn't like,
trophy. Right, trophy.
Yeah, right. It wasn't claiming scalps. It wasn't a trophy. Yeah, it was genuinely for... Now, obviously you can still say that's bad, okay, and fair enough. Because he was accused of breaking into the morgue and severing it, okay. So that's... If he did that, that's fucked up, okay. It is. But yeah, it wasn't a trophy. But anyway, he's not the only one who's accused of doing that, okay? It depends on what, historian you go for here. Because another person who was, accused of it was, who was it? Sorry, I'm just going through my prep here. Oh yeah, the hospital's barber. So this guy is called John, God, how do you say that? Subrain, I'm not sure how the hell you say that. It's spelled Seughraane. Anyway, he was known as Dan the Barber, alright? So that's what I'm going to call him. So
also, on a historical note, barbers were basically physicians for the time.
I did not know this until I read this article.
Dentists and physicians.
Yeah, so it was not uncommon for barbers to actually work at hospitals and perform minor surgeries.
Yeah,
that's right. The people who cut your hair would actually come in and actually cut into your flesh. Not as much as like what the trained surgeons would do. They would only do it for minor procedures. But yeah, I never knew that till I read this article.
It's the history of the barber's pole. The red stripe means basic operations, and the blue stripe means dentistry.
Oh.
Yep.
Okay. I had no idea.
So the plain white one means that I literally just cut hair. I cut hair and shape beards. That's it. Red stripe means I've got physician's training and I can stitch up wounds and etc. And the blue stripe means I've got dentistry skills.
Right. Okay. I only ever thought of a barber as someone who cut your hair.
Nope.
Okay, well, Dan the Barber, who worked at this hospital, so this was the Hobart General Hospital where King Billy was lying in state, he allegedly also had an interest in skull collection. So this claim has emerged because there's an inquiry actually going on into the ill treatment of patients in Tasmania.
Mm.
And so the hospital board chairman, John Edwards, revealed a man named Abraham Cohen, who resided at the rear of the Theatre Royal, which is the hospital, refused to go to the hospital for medical treatment. And the reason why this guy went is because he heard all of these rumors that Dan the Barber was, in the case that you died during surgery or treatment, he would actually cut off your head so that he could collect your skull. So it is interesting that there's a Jewish name involved here, but I don't think there was any, Jewish involvement in skull collection. In fact, he was just afraid that his own skull was going to be collected.
What was that fucking, metal lead singer he had 2 songs. It's like, I've got skulls in my basement and I've got guns for murder. And then they raid his house and they find skulls in his basement and a fucking firearms collection.
That might have been the Cannibal Corpse guy. I'm not
Likely.
sure. I know one of them went on a meth bender and was like robbing houses and stuff. Obviously, not handling life outside the band very well. But yeah, there's other people, by the way, who are implicated in stealing the skull too. But I don't know. I guess we'll never really know who it was.
It's one of the things we run into a whole bunch, especially when it comes to Aboriginals, just because of how alien they are to the rest of humanity. Anytime you do like a racially targeted medical study on them, you just get to fund it instantly. Literally, it was doctors who are now called like, Australia's Mangala, who basically figured out their renal system doesn't function the same way that everyone else's renal system functions.
What, and they're subject to the same kind of rumors that Dr. Mangala was... Oh, God.
Yeah. It's like, literally, this fucking, section of humanity is so fucking foreign to the rest of it, it's got different systems that act differently. And if you think that I'm just bullshitting or et cetera, look up the racially targeted medicine episode of House, because they literally had to, they had to do this on purpose. They had to explain racially targeted medicine on a House episode because they had this fucking problem with like black people wondering why they weren't prescribed the same medication as white people.
Yeah, I mean, medical science is actually, I find a good way of communicating race realism. When, for example, the Red Cross calls on more black people to donate blood.
The classifieds.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally your blood type is dictated by the antigens surrounding your blood cells. So your blood cells have antigens with them. That's what dictates your blood type. Now there's other antigens attached to your blood cell called nucleosides, and they're race specific.
Right. So racial differences are not merely skin deep, obviously. Okay. They apply.
You may bleed red, but it's not the same material.
Okay, so look, on the proposed Ministry of Truth, that is still not getting too much media coverage, really only a little bit from the Murdoch press. The Australian Human Rights Commission has warned against giving the body power to be the sole arbiter of truth. Now, this is an institution. The Human Rights Commission, right, you could really actually call it like the Racial Vilification Commission. It operates in the same way. This is very much an established deep state entity, and even they are now warning against this. Okay, they're saying that this goes too far because these laws effectively want to give the communication minister and ACMA, which is the regulatory authority, the right to regulate misinformation on the internet. As we've gone over before, it doesn't really apply to news outlets, and it definitely does not apply to the government. The government can put out whatever kind of bullshit they want. So it applies to, guys like us, what we're doing right now. So it has raised concerns from them. They think that ACMA would be given way too much power and effectively allows them to police the internet. Now, even people inside ACMA are being concerned about it as well. So the body's chair, Neera O'Loughlin, has admitted that when there were concerns that were submitted by Meta and Twitter, that they were valid. Okay? Now, she went on to say she wasn't quite sure of the reasoning that they were given, but she did also say that she understands why they have these concerns. So, when you've got these key players from the Human Rights Commission and from ACMA actually all admitting that there are issues here, that should tell you a lot, okay? It's not just hysterics coming from Andrew Bolt or us, all right?
No.
A lot of people have got concerns here. So, as far as I know, the coalition does not have, the federal coalition that is, does not have an official policy yet against these laws. But you're getting more and more coalition frontbenchers who are coming out and speaking against it. So this includes David Littleproud, Dan Tehan, Barnaby Joyce, Bridget McKenzie, and they refer to this as an arbiter of truth. I don't think it's enough. And we need to see an official position announced by Peter Dutton in the same way that he announced opposition to The Voice. If we want to actually have a chance of knocking this back. I mean, for one thing, if he does that, he's going to put it into the media cycle more, which is what we need, because it is not getting much coverage at all right now. Okay.
This is retarded. You know, it's gonna shut my entire industry down. My entire industry is spreading racial hate online.
All right, so just a couple more stories, guys. We know this is a long episode because it's a little bit of catch up, but so just quickly on education, universities are going to be facing sanctions over awarding teaching degrees to graduates who cannot keep control of rowdy classrooms or fail to actually implement basic teaching techniques like instructing on how to read and write properly. Okay. Oh, well, this, again, just makes me think, why wasn't this done before? I mean, at minimum, this is what teachers should be able to do. You need to teach the basics of reading, writing, and maths, and you need to be able to control the classroom. Okay? If you can't do that, you shouldn't be a teacher. Simple as that. Because I'm talking about primary and high school teachers here. Okay, I'm not talking about tertiary education. And we know that, like, one of the reasons this is happening is because they just keep lowering the bar. Like,
but tertiary, if you can't handle an entire audience full of hungover people, then probably you shouldn't be in tertiary either.
Man, I will never ever forget one day, you know, ages ago when I was at uni. And I was there. Unfortunately, we had landed a Saturday morning exam. Sometimes that would happen, you know. We just couldn't fit everyone in during the week. And when I was standing outside, like, the gym or whatever it was where the exam was taking place, I remember there was this group. It was 2 guys and 1 girl who were talking. And they were talking about how hungover they were. All right?
Oh, Jesus.
We were about to go into an exam, okay, at like 9:30 in the morning. And they were complaining about how hungover they were because they went out partying the night before. I will never forget that. And that was a long time ago, by the way.
Nothing's changed.
Yeah, well, no, I was going to say, how much worse has it gotten since then? Because I'd say things have changed. They've probably gotten worse because they continue to drop the entry scores. And we know that education degrees, these are where they drop them the most because of the teacher shortage, right? So, you know, rather than incentivize them in normal ways, like, say, give them more money or get classrooms under control or improve the curricula as well, you know, remove all of this gender ideology shit, which...
Let me teach chemistry to your kids. I 100% promise I will not tell them how to fucking make touch powder from pharmaceutical supplies.
Well, okay. But no, I mean, like, a lot of the woke crap that they put into the curriculum... that deters a lot of teachers from taking up the job because they're like, I don't want to teach that shit. You know, and that's also why we have a big shortage in particular of male teachers, all right? Because they're the ones more likely to have an aversion to all of that shit. So they stay out of the profession. But all we do is just keep lowering the score in which you can get in. So now, rather than actually bring the score back up, they're just putting pressure on the universities to make sure that these people can keep the classroom under control and actually know how to read and count and write properly. And again, you just say, okay, fine. I do agree with this. That's I would say just kind of too little, too late on that, and much better ways of actually improving the quality of those degrees for teachers. All right, let's just do rapid fire on the remaining stories we've got here.
Yep.
Despite the fact one of the areas that received a huge funding boost in the last federal budget, childcare, the fees are still rising faster than the inflation rate. Okay. Holy shit. Now, maybe they're not, maybe they're only going higher than the official rate, but still, considering the fact that they are supposed to be putting downward pressure on it, again, it's one of these examples where every time they put funding into it, the prices actually just rise to such an extent where it becomes even more expensive than before the funding increase, and then you have to have another funding increase. So, yeah, good luck throwing more money into that black hole. So the Christian lobby groups are again exerting pressure on Labor to implement religious protections. They're saying not necessarily the religious discrimination bill, although of course they are pushing for that as well. But they want more short-term. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, look, they're still always pushing for that, but they know that that's a long-term debate. So what they're talking about now is just more kind of short-term measures that would deal with things, for example, as the compulsory takeover of the Calvary Hospital in the ACT. Now remember, that was the privately owned Catholic hospital that did not do abortion and euthanasia procedures. The ACT territory government actually just came in and said, we own this now. We're taking it over so that we can perform these procedures. The federal government has the right to stop that, okay? And John Howard probably would have stopped that. Not spruiking for John Howard. But, he did stop them from passing gay marriage legislation, for example. And in the Northern Territory, they were stopped from passing euthanasia laws. So you can intervene here, but Labor's not doing anything about it. I haven't even seen them say anything about this. So, sorry, Christian lobby, I don't think you're going to have any luck there.
No. They've been spamming my fucking email.
Well, considering we're talking about abortions, I'll do that story now. So, medical abortions, not just in WA, because remember we are, streamlining our process now under the system where you have it approved, but they're going to be more accessible nationwide. And that is because of the, what is this drug called? RU57, I think it's what it's called. This is what's known as the abortion pill, right? And it's different from the morning after pill. The morning after pill, as the name suggests, means you take it the day after having unprotected sex and, stopping a pregnancy in that regard. The RU57 pill can actually be taken weeks after.
Oh, so, Jesus Christ.
That's why they refer to it as an abortion pill. It's like it's an early on abortion, but still it's an abortion nonetheless. So it goes a bit further. So basically what's happening is the Therapeutic Goods Administration is making it so that it will be prescribed just like any other medicine, and it would be on the PBS. So you'd get like 2/3 of the cost paid for by the government.
It's a good pill because its little fucking pharmaceutical registry has nothing on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fucking fine.
Oh, God. So, yeah, it's like,
Mephistrone.
Cheap instant abortions for everyone is what we're getting. Okay, and, last story, Craig Kelly is saying he's the victim of, what we refer to as selective prosecution. Now, this is about his bid for the last federal election where, of course, he was running for the United Australia Party. And when you have your campaign poster or your core flute, your billboard, you still have to have that, authorized by such and such for this party in this location. Those fast voices that you hear at the end of political ads, you still have to have that in writing on your poster. In this case, Craig Kelly is accused of putting that authorization message in a font that was too small. Okay. So the Australian Electoral Commission does have regulations in terms of the visibility of that authorization message, and Craig Kelly was said to have made it too invisible and too illegible and too small on his campaign posters. Now, at the same time, Craig Kelly is actually basically saying, yeah, that's true, like I did do that. But he's saying, look, there's plenty of other people who are doing it as well. You're just pointing the finger at me. So, he's probably right. He's probably right. But, you know, you have to account for those contingencies and say, well, look, you know, just like us white nationalists, we have to take more precautions than most people do. Because, you know, Antifa will get away at slashing the tires of cop cars at certain events. And the cops won't do anything about it. Whereas we just have to be careful that we don't even say naughty things on the internet. So, unfortunately, Craig Kelly, you know, you've got much higher standards to meet. And that's just the way it works. Okay, there we go. I think we actually got about 3 hours in for you guys, so.
Long one.
It was a long one. But, yeah, thanks for listening. We're going to try and get on. We do have an XYZ channel on YouTube at the moment.
Yeah.
Going to see if we can get a racer one going as well. We'll see. I don't know. Apparently they are regulating it a little less harshly than what they were, say, when we got banned.
They thought they killed everyone off.
That might be it. They might just think, hey, we got rid of them all now, and now we don't have to watch it quite as carefully as what we did before. That might be part of it. I don't know. But anyway, next XYZ Live, Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern. You should be able to watch us on Odyssey and on YouTube. So we'll keep you posted on that. So till then, RacerBiz, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.